John, it's great to have you on the podcast. Your origin story is a rich one. I remember seeing you in the movie The Secret, which is, I don't know, how many years ago was that now?
20 years.
It's amazing. It feels like yesterday. It's funny how time goes faster as you get older. But it was certainly a well-watched documentary. But you're a pretty famous guy. But I'd love to hear about your origin story. I like my audience to get to know the guests and just kind of get a sense of who they are and what makes them tick. And as I was looking through all my research that I did, kind of just to see what you've been up to lately, I saw where your origin story included Paul Bragg, and I was really surprised by that because he was one of my heroes along with Jack LaLanne. And so when I saw there was a connection to you, I thought, wow, that's a neat little connecting point there. So feel free just to kind of give everybody a sense of who you are and what shaped you. And I'd love to hear about Paul Bragg in there.
Well, born in 1954, Houston, Texas. Had a malpositioning of my arm and leg. It was turned inward. So from about a 1.5 to 4, I wore braces on my left side, arm and leg, to try to straighten them.
Mm-hmm.
At a 1.5, I also went to a speech pathologist because I wasn't making sounds properly. Had to use strings and buttons in my mouth, all kind of like exercises.
Oral therapy.
And around 6, going on 7, when I tried to go into elementary school, I found out that I had dyslexia and my reading wasn't working. Wasn't getting it. And if somebody said something to me, I could recite a sound, but reading it and making sense out of it and putting the letters proper was just not working. My teacher would put me in normal reading and then to remedial reading and then into a dunce group. I had to wear a dunce cap.
Boy, was she wrong.
Which I turned into a wizard's cap later, but that's okay. She asked my parents to come to the school to discuss the situation. And she said in front of me and my mom and dad that I'm afraid your son is never going to be able to read, not be able to write effectively because I was writing with my hand turned inward backwards. And probably not go very far in life, not to mount to anything, not be able to communicate effectively. Because I did have speech challenges. I was in the dunce clap with a guy named Daryl who was, they called handicapped in those days.
Yeah.
And I made it through elementary school by befriending the smartest girls and guys and asking them what they got out of the classes. And I found a strategy by asking smart kids questions to get information, audio, and I made it through school to 6th grade asking questions. What I'm known for today is the questions that I ask.
Me too.
So that's, you know, every crisis has a blessing in it. There's always the other side. And, you know, it's on the way, but we don't see it on the way initially.
Yeah.
When I turned 12, my parents moved from Houston, Texas to Richmond, Texas, which is a small town outside the city, which is now part of the city. And it's a country town and 9,000 people, so very low socioeconomics, and a lot of differences in racial issues. I tried to go to school there, and I didn't have smart kids around me. So I ended up leaving school and kind of left home at age 13.
Wow.
And I became a street kid. And it's not because I didn't have any magnificent parents. I did, but this is the 1960s, and it was a little different era. And I decided I was going to do my own thing. And I wanted to surf.
Cool.
Texas wasn't the surf capital.
Not really.
I could stand on a surfboard, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I started riding a surfboard at 9, and by the time I was 13, I said, I want to go to California and I want to go to Hawaii, and that's it. So I hitchhiked to California at 14, and then down into Mexico at 14 illegally. And thank God Trump wasn't running the borders at the time. I wouldn't have got through.
You might not have got home at least.
Yeah. But at 15, I made it over to the North Shore, and I lived under a bridge first, and then in a park bench, and then in a abandoned car, and then I finally got a tent that I was able to get, and I became a surf. I mean, I actually got into a couple surf movies, 3 surf movies, and surf magazines and stuff like that. I rode big waves, 40-foot waves.
Wow, great.
And in fact, 2 of the guys that I lived in a tent with, I'm having dinner with on the 2nd of June. They're meeting me on my ship. So I live on a ship.
That's
right
great.
now I'm sailing out in the French Polynesia Islands here. But anyway, I lived there in a tent eventually and rode big waves. And I nearly died one time at Laniakea. I had many close calls surfing big waves, many close calls. But I almost died. And in the recovery from that, I was led to a health food store. And there was an Afro-American albino guy sitting at the counter while I was having a carrot juice. And he said, "Man, you need a yoga class, man," because I had spasms from I almost died from. I had a strychnine cyanide poisoning. And so he told me to go to a yoga class. If I hadn't met that guy, I may not even thought about the word yoga, but I went to this yoga class. I saw this flyer on the door at the health food store, and I decided to go to this yoga class. And it was a female yogi with about 25 students or something like that, sitting on mats and on towels on this wooden floor at the Sunset Recreation Hall, North Shore, near Waimea Bay. And Paul C. Bragg was a guest speaker.
Oh, that's amazing.
And as he was speaking, he leaned over and stood up on one hand and continued lecturing on one hand upside down. We're like going, what? And the guy was so adamant and so clear and so affirmed about what he was believing about yoga and exercise. He called them the 7 doctors: breathe deeply, drink natural water, eat natural foods. He was very unique individual, probably in his 80s. And that was that one night, the way he spoke, and he took us through a guided imagery alpha meditation experience, my life changed. I was told I would never read, write, communicate, never mount a thing, never go very far in life. And I believed that. I had evidence of it, but I could surf. But the night he said that, I thought to myself, maybe, just maybe, I could someday become intelligent.
Maybe.
Never crossed the thought that I could be academically intelligent up until that night.
That's great. That's great. Amazing how the miracles of contact, and how somebody who's really centered in their being can center so many other people so quickly.
He was inspiring. And then he gave us this guided imagery meditation experience. And he had us close our eyes. He showed this little mandala thing. And I went into kind of a deep meditation. And in there, I saw a vision. And I may have to just pull that thing up and show you. But give me a second. I'll pull up something that you might find interesting. But he took us through this guided imagery meditation experience. And in that meditation, I saw myself walking through a stoned archway, then over to the right, and then out onto a balcony over a giant square with 1 million people in it, with an iconic building from around the world, from every major city in the world. It just came in my vision. This painting that I'm about to show you was painted by Andrew Tischler, who painted that experience.
Oh, wow. That's cool. And that's what you saw in your vision.
I saw that when I was 17. Now, he painted me, when he met me, I was 50 something. And so he painted me with that image in it because it wouldn't make any sense otherwise.
Right. It looks great.
I didn't see me in it. I saw me looking out at it.
Right.
But he added part to it just to make it contextual. It's the painting is called A Man on a Mission with a Vision and a Message.
Yeah.
So I saw myself that night with him orating, speaking. And I thought, whoa, I hadn't, and that's the farthest thing from what I imagined happening in the night that night.
Yeah.
But I've held that vision 53 plus years now, 54 in November. And it's now my reality. I had a dream at that time, that night, I had a dream that I wanted to travel the world, go to every country on the face of the earth, and share like this man had done with me and do the same for other people. I wanted to do what he just did for me. I've spoken in 172 countries now.
That's great. So, well, my podcast is listened to in 172 countries. How's that for a correlation?
Well, we got that in common. But so my life changed the night I met that gentleman. And I then started to attempt to go back and learn how to read. And it was a slow process. But I'll tell you something. I got to share this story. I left Hawaii 1973. This happened in 1972 when I met Paul Bragg. In 1973, the spring, when the surf was coming down on the North Shore, I, in a meditation, thought, it's time for me to go visit my parents. I haven't seen my parents since I was 13. So I decided I'm going to go back and see my parents, go back to Texas. So I flew to LA. It was $86 in those days. And then I hitchhiked back to Texas. And when I got home, my parents encouraged me to take a GED, a high school equivalency test. Paul Bragg said, when I asked him, I said, I don't know how to read. I got a speech impediment. He said, that's not a problem. Just say I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom every single day. If you say it every single day, sooner or later, the cells of your body will tingle with it and so will the world. So I've never missed a day since that night. Well, since the day he told me that, I never missed a day saying that to myself. I always say a genius is one who listens to their inner voice and follows their inner vision and obeys it and doesn't let the world on the outside interfere with the vision and dreams on the inside. But I set out to do that. And I passed the test miraculously. I passed this GED test and I had me a high school degree. And it was guessing, just purely saying I'm a genius and guessing and putting a pencil dot on something,
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, cool. I passed that. I'm now a high school graduate. And I tried to go on to a junior college because college wouldn't let me take a GED and go directly in. And I thought I was going to do the same miraculous thing in that, but I ended up failing the class. The first test. And I got a 27 instead of 72. I remember going out to my car and crying. And all I could hear was my first grade teacher speak. And I'm afraid he'll never read, never write, communicate, And driving home with tears in my eyes, thinking maybe this whole idea of traveling the world and teaching is a delusion. I better go back surfing. I know how to stand on a surfboard. I came home and I was crying in the living room, right underneath this little beautiful Bible stand my mom had. And she came home from shopping. She said, what happened, son? What's wrong? What happened? Because she hadn't seen me crying since I was 13. And I said, I blew the test. I guess I don't have what it takes. And I repeated the first grade teacher. And then she said something that really shifted me, which I'm very grateful for. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, whether you become a great teacher, healer, philosopher, and travel the world like you say you dream, whether you go back and ride giant waves on the North Shore, which you've done, or you return and panhandle in the streets as a bum, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do.
Well, that's pretty powerful.
That was powerful. When she said that, my hand went into this fist of determination.
Yeah.
And I looked up and I saw that vision that I just showed you.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching, healing, and philosophy. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my source of love. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of on the earth, stop me from my dreams, not even myself. I got up with this amazing determination. There's no turning back kind of feeling. I hugged my mom. I went into my room. I got a Funk and Wagnall's dictionary, which I still have in my office in Houston. It's covered in tape. And I went to the beginning of that dictionary and I made a commitment to memorize 30 words a day. So what I did is I started to take 30 words. I would write them 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
I would pronounce them 20 times. I would read their meaning 20 times. And I would put them into a sentence 20 times and recite it until I knew those 20 words. And I did that every single day. And my mom tested me on 30 new words a day, each day. And my vocabulary grew 20,000 words in 2 years.
That's great.
And I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class.
Yeah, that's determination.
When I was 19, a year into it, my mom said, what do you want for your birthday and Christmas? Because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. And she said, what do you want for birthday and Christmas? I said, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth by the greatest writers and the greatest thinkers ever known. And she looked at me with a pause. She said, are you sure you don't want a t-shirt?
That's funny.
I said, no, Mom, I don't care about clothes. I just want to have knowledge now. I want to know. So she contacted her brother, who was my uncle, Ralph, who was a professor at MIT. He was a physicist and chemist, very bright guy. And as a gift, he sent 2 giant 6 by 6 by 6 foot wooden crates on a flatbed truck to our home. They unloaded them onto the ground. I got a crowbar out and I pulled the crates apart. And I brought in thousands of books into my room and surrounded them and stacked them in my room, except for my little yoga place, my little yoga mat at the window to do the sun salute. And I went to work.
Oh, that's awesome.
I started reading 18 to 20 hours a day. I slept 4 hours a day. I meditated, I did yoga. I was going to school, but I was reading. It was every hour I was available. And I've never stopped reading since. I'm sure, like you probably are an avid reader and just have devoured everything you can get your hands on the nature of reality and these kind of things. And that led me to gradually having students. The first students that came to me started at 18. And by the time I was 20, I used to have 100, 120, 150, up to 400 students a day gathered under the trees at the University of Houston.
That's awesome.
Which is now, they now have the Bauer School of Entrepreneur right on top of the amphitheater, and that building is now on top of where I used to speak. And they asked me to keynote speak the opening of this entrepreneur college. And they didn't know that this is where I used to speak.
That's great.
So my journey began, and I started to, anybody that would listen to me, I would speak to. And I eventually I made my way through professional school by speaking. And I started charging for my daily classes. I get up at 2:30 in the morning and 2 o'clock in the morning and do yoga for 30 minutes, then speed read from 2:30 to 6:30, 4 to 7 books. By then I was knocking out a book under an hour, and I was devouring 4 to 7 books. And then that night I would do a talk after I got through with clinic. I would do a talk on that topic. And I do that for 3 hours from 7 to 10, go to bed at 10 and get up at 2 again. And I just accelerated my learning capacities, my unconscious knowing and conscious knowing as fast as I could. And I've pretty well never stopped that pattern. I still read and write every day. I still pretty well speak, doing a podcast or a seminar or a live webinar or some sort of thing every day. And I write books and articles. I'm just an educator. So who am I? I'm a teacher, researcher, writer, and traveler.
That's awesome.
I'm sailing in the French Polynesia right now.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. It's a great story. It's a great story for people to hear, especially. I think there's so many people in a young generation today that feel a bit lost in themselves and don't really feel. I don't think they have a lot of role models right now. You know, Jack LaLanne. I wasn't allowed to have a television when I was a kid. We had a 142-acre working farm. And my father's rule was television will distract you from your work. So you're not going to have a television. But whenever I'd go to my friend's house, anytime I could see Jack LaLanne, I got very inspired by him. And I know he had a relationship with Paul Bragg as well. And
Can I share something?
Yeah.
When I was 2, my mom turned on Jack LaLanne each morning, and he had that organ playing, and he was with his dog in a chair, and he did his routine of workout. My mom was doing that workout, so I was working out to Jack LaLanne when I was 2.
Well, that's great. We have a good connection right there.
And when Jack LaLanne met Paul Bragg, he was a pimple-faced, out-of-fit, unhealthy guy, and Paul Bragg inspired him, and then he became an icon for America for health.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there's a great example of the power that any one individual can have, which kind of leads me to the second thing I wanted to ask you. And this is a bit of a spiritual question. You know, without going through my whole story, I have a lot of similarities to you in many ways, which is quite interesting. But my mother became a yogi when I was 12 and joined the Self-Realization Fellowship which is the teachings of Yogananda, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And so that was a real special point in my life, because that's when I learned meditation and got to ask monks questions, who were the first people that could actually answer my questions, which is why I left school, because I couldn't get answers to my questions and I got ridiculed for asking questions. But, you know, I for many, many reasons, and I do a lot of deep work in this field, feel that the soul is actually built out of relationships. And there came a point in my life where it was all of a sudden like I could see how all the people and all the jobs, even the ones I thought I hated and were just doing to survive and make money to feed my family, all held puzzle pieces to ultimately what I came to do. And when I had that realization, I could see that there was like an invisible line of connection, and that I always felt like from that moment on that there was always invisible guidance. So have you had this experience, and do you feel that there is something inherently bringing us together? And, you know, some people might say, well, we're all in soul groups. You know, people think of guiding angels, guardian angels. I mean, there's so many different conceptions of this in many different circles. I'm just wondering if you feel that there's something in that line that's working through you and working through everybody.
If you are enjoying this podcast and the topic of shadow work intrigues you, then we'd like to invite you to join Paul's Spirit Gym priority notification list. Spirit Gym members share their experiences and aha moments, as well as supporting each other's personal growth and helping one another to find and live a life filled with meaning and purpose. Coming soon, Paul is releasing a whole new dimension to the Spirit Gym community, and you can be one of the first to learn more and grab the opportunity. Head over to myspiritgym.com and sign up to be notified when doors open. That's myspiritgym.com to join the priority notification list.
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. And I'm asked not to always say these things, but I think you appreciate this.
You can say anything to me. My podcast, my people are deep. My podcast is considered the deepest podcast in the world by many. So let it rip, baby.
When I hitchhiked to California when I was 14, I finally made it to where I wanted to go, which is Huntington Beach, California. That was kind of the surf center of California.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting on the tip of my surfboard because I hitchhike with my surfboard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the tip of my surfboard waiting for the offshore breeze to straighten up the onshore chop as it's getting close to sunset. And I'm about to go out. And I'm literally right on the edge of the beach near the water. And over my left shoulder, a 27-year-old, beautiful, blue-eyed blonde girl came up to me. Stunning. And she said, "Are you a runaway?" And I said, "Not exactly. My parents dropped me off on the freeway." And she said, "Do you have a place to stay?" And I said, "Well, I'm planning on staying here on the beach." Because in Texas, you can sleep on the beach, or used to. And she says, "Well, you can't stay here. There's a curfew at 10 o'clock. I said, "Oh," unless she said, "You stay down at the cliffs." I said, "Well, I guess I'll go down the cliffs," which is over a mile away. She said, "Do you need a place to stay?" Now, when a 27-year-old, blue-eyed, stunning 10 on the Richter scale says, "Do you need a place to stay?" I don't care what the friggin' age you have a natural tendency to say,
yes,
sure.
An angel has arrived.
An angel has arrived. So he said, "Well, then come with me." And of course, I was no problem doing that. I forgot surfing that afternoon.
Yeah.
But I walked with her up the steps at Huntington Beach Pier, down Main Street where it turns to the left, across a little railroad track that's no longer there, and over to Indianapolis Street. And in this little house we went. And she said, "You can put your surfboard here. Here's a towel. You can take a shower. I'll fix you some food. And you can sleep up in the attic in this waterbed." And the attic waterbed had a tapestry on top of it. It says, "I do my thing, you do your thing. And if by chance," you remember that quote.
Long time, yeah.
Yeah. And I came out from the shower and she had some spaghetti sitting there for me. And we chatted. And then I was a bit tired. I've been hitchhiking. So I decided I was going to go to bed early and get up early and surf. She tinkered in the kitchen cleaning up stuff. And then I heard her come up the steps because there's a little step thing. And she came in and laid there on top of me and we made love.
Awesome, man. That is an angel.
And I said, "Now, this is 1968. So this is the free love days."
Yeah.
This is where drugs, sex, and rock and roll were pretty standard.
Yep.
And the Vietnam War period, right? So free love, peace, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of went, now today that she would be in trouble because that would be called pedophilia or something like that.
How old were you?
I was 14. I never went to therapy over this. I never felt I needed therapy.
I don't think you needed therapy at all. In fact, you had the therapist.
I had the therapist. So anyway, I became pretty close friends with her. And then I found out as we talked that she had a son who was 4 years old and was married, but divorced. And the husband was a very wealthy family. The son came from a wealthy family. He was younger than her, 24 and a half, but the family felt she could not provide for the child, so they took the child from her.
Oh, my God.
So she was making bathing suits to try to earn enough money to get her child back.
Wow.
So when I came along, if you added her husband's age and her son's age and divided by 2, I was that age.
Wow, that's an interesting correlation.
And so I was now partly her husband, lovemaking, and partly her son, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of things.
Yeah.
Now, if you took my mom's age and my average girlfriend's age, added them together and divided by 2, that was her age. So she was playing partly my girlfriend and partly my mom. And I
really thought about this.
Well, I learned at 14 that nothing's missing.
Right. Yeah. And you're also dealing with some archetypal patterns there.
Yeah. And you realize that it's just morphing. I teach people today that the master lives in a world of transformation, never the illusions of gain and loss.
Right. It's amazing.
So I learned there. Then I did a blooper. I met this other girl on the beach. It was my age. And I was going back to where the house was to get a t-shirt on because I was getting sunburned. And when I walked in the house, the girl was standing out on the sidewalk, not in the house, but on the sidewalk. And the woman came home. And now she's perceiving that her husband's having an affair.
Right. Yeah. That triggered some unhealed wounds there.
Yeah. So she said, I'll have to leave. So I was back on the street now. So I ended up sleeping behind the Golden Bear, which is across the street from the Huntington Pier, which is a nightclub. And Buddy Miles was playing there. And so I slept out on a pallet behind it. And Buddy Miles came out back and had some pretzels and something to drink on his break. And he became like a father figure. And one of the ladies that worked in the bar there in the club was like a new mother figure. So I now got a new mother and father figure that were more my parents' age. And I was back to dating girls the age on the beach. So I watched the morphing of my family dynamics changing. Then I got me a job at lunchtime at Jack's Surf Shop. And if I worked for an hour making smoothies and sandwiches and avocados and stuff, I got one sandwich free. And Jack and the girl that was running the show with him was my parents' age, and the girl's on the beach again. So I watched that whole summer. Then when I went down to Mexico later that summer, I watched all these people playing family dynamics, and I felt that nothing was missing and I was being taken care of and being guided the whole time.
Yeah. I love that, but I want to take it one step deeper. What do you think's orchestrating that?
Well, we can come up with all kinds of hypotheticals, but I'm
asking you what you think.
No, I know. I like to think that there is. I'm not a believer in anthropomorphic deities.
I don't either.
Punishing and rewarding anthropomorphic deities. 16,000 deities like that are extinct today. Those are just inventions based on our phobias, creating our philias and fantasies to compensate for our insecurities. But I do believe more of almost a panpsychic Spinoza's idea of an intelligence that runs the universe, that governs through the laws of the universe. And the more we study the laws of the universe, we come in tune with it. And I always say the laws of the universe, we don't violate. The human laws, we violate. Yeah. They're violable. So I'm not so much interested in the anthropomorphic moral constraints and hypocrisies and those types of deities. I'm more interested in a subtle presence that homeostates and guides and directs every event to assist us in being our most authentic self in a sustainable, fair exchange function where we're most prioritized and feeling fulfilled and called to do what we're here to do. I believe that everything that's going on in our life is on the way to help us be our most magnificent self. And that field of intelligence I've believed in since I was very young.
Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, it's not only facilitating our life, but we are it. So it's facilitating its own life and its own evolution.
Exactly. Yes. I don't think, the biggest question, reflective awareness, where the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same.
Yeah.
And as a statement, we become our true selves to the degree that we make everyone and everything else ourselves as a pure reflection universe. I believe we're part of that intelligence and to me, that's the highest intelligence we have, to realize that whatever it is around us is us.
No question.
And we're part of it. And to make it a part instead of honoring the whole two is to miss out on the magnificence of who we are.
Yeah, this wasn't in the outline, but you're making me want to share this conception of you. I believe that a lot of people's pain, challenges, and confusion, and a lot of unnecessary strife comes from any programming that isolates the self with a small SELF from the capital SELF.
That's it.
I think Jung beautifully described it. He said, speaking of the capital SELF, the capital SELF is everything that supports your ability to live and to exist, to be. And
Negentropic.
yes. And so when we develop isms and religions that segregate each other and kill each other in the name of God, then what you have is really the objectification of the self as this or that. And I think that is extremely destructive. It makes for, it's like an elementary schoolyard where kids are fighting over the hopscotch box and shooting spitballs at each other and not realizing that they are each other, or that I think it's something I would really love to see humanity outgrow.
Well, if everybody was a CEO, we'd have problems in the corporate world. So we got to have the employees too, as I say. The Buddha says, I will teach them the illusion until they're ready for truth.
Yeah.
When I was in elementary school, there was a science portion of the class where you had at the front of the room an atom chart, and you had hydrogen, small atom on the left, and at the far right, 92 protons and electrons or whatever, you had uranium. Mm-hmm. And each one was progressively larger. And so in elementary school, you think that an atom's a little ball, and you see a box with blue, red, and white sticks and stuff, and you make models out of it, and you think atoms are balls. Mm-hmm. And so that's the reality that you're taught at that stage of awareness. Then you go to high school, which I didn't really finish, but I remember, and I went back to speak in high school sometimes. Now you're taught, no, the Bohr atom, it's a little solar system. Mm-hmm. There's protons and neutrons that are kind of in this little ball, this morula, and then there's these electrons going around it, and it's like a little solar system. Yeah. And then it's a little bit more abstract, a little bit more mathematical, not as concrete. And then you go to college after high school, and you go, well, wait a minute now. It's a probability distribution based on complex mathematics and
imaginary numbers.
Imaginary numbers. And now we've got Schrodinger's equation dealing with the probability, the square of the probability. So now you're going, wait, no, it's an abstract, it's more abstract, and it's more mathematical as you go. And then you go on to professorship, and then you realize that there's infinitudes inside that, infinities that have to be renormalized out, because this isn't actually it either. It's another approximation. And we got point sources of 1 over infinity space representing a particle. And we've got all these flaws in this model. So it's just an abstract model. It's the best we got. Mm-hmm. And then we realize we really don't friggin' know. We don't know what matter and energy is. We've got theories and the standard model, and we've got all these things that we go by. So we had to be taught the illusion that's concrete until we're ready for the abstraction. Yeah. And then the pinnacle of the abstraction is the pursuit of holy curiosity and the willingness to not know, but to be in the pursuit. Einstein said it many times, religions answer questions they don't understand, and science is constantly going, we don't understand it, and we're living in the pursuit of trying to understand it. And so we're in pursuit, but we wouldn't pursue science if we didn't believe there was some sort of rational order in the universe. And this is the field of intelligence that I think we both understand to be this matrix, if you will. And I think that it's normal for gradations of awareness from our amygdala subcortical nuclei all the way to our cortex, levels of awareness, going more abstract as they go, and more aware and broader minded as we go, and more humble as we go. More humble to this magnificence. I always say humbleness to this true divinity is what brings certainty to humanity. And this true divinity is not a punishing, rewarding, and morally hypocritical construct to force people to be a certain way or anything with its in-group, out-group biases and tribal thinking. It's a universal wisdom. It's a universal presence. And it's there to guide through our own feedback systems, our own homeostatic mechanisms that bring negentropic life into existence. It's there to help us to master our lives.
Yeah, I agree. there's a million things I could say, but I think you've beautifully said it. And it's such a mystery. I was having a conversation with a bunch of my students, and one of the questions that I was asking them is, what is your conception of God? And one of my students said something beautiful. She said, I don't know for sure, but somebody gave me a great quote the other day. They said, God is the blanket that wraps the mystery. And I said, that's a great one.
That don't work. I personally, this is my feeling about it. If you don't mind if I elaborate a bit.
No, go for it. I love this topic.
By the way, I don't know if you can see it, but right out my window is a beautiful rainbow. Do you see it?
Oh yeah, look at that! How gorgeous! And I live in Rainbow Hills, California.
Yeah, I get a lot of rainbows on the ship here, but and
my property is called Rainbow Hills, by the way, where I live. That's my farm.
That's great. I like to think of the soul as a state of unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
SOUL.
Yeah.
And now let me develop that. And I call it our authentic essential self.
Mm-hmm.
When we meet somebody and we have a disowned part and a distinction between self and other, and we perceive them in our consciousness, we're conscious of their upsides and unconscious of their downsides. We put them on a pedestal and are attracted to them with impulses from our amygdala. We are now too humble to admit what we see in them inside us. We have a disowned part, a dismembered part, a deflected part. And therefore, we're not whole.
Mm-hmm.
And when we minimize ourselves relative to this person we put on a pedestal, because if we're conscious of their upsides and unconscious of their downsides, by the law of contrast, we become conscious of our downsides and unconscious of our upsides by contrast. So we're now too humble to admit what we see in them inside us. We've deflected what we see. The seer, the seeing, and the seen are not the same. And we now have a disconnect, as you described.
Mm-hmm.
We're now believing that there's something greater than us mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we do, that disowned part leaves us feeling empty.
Mm-hmm.
As Empedocles said, that's the strife we live with, not the love. We have a strife because we now have an internal conflict. Why? Because values automatically go from those who have the most power to those who have the least power in society. So the people we put on a pedestal, which Freud called the superego,
Mm-hmm.
we inject the values of those into our life and attempt to live in their values. And trying to live in somebody else's values is futile. It's non-sustainable.
Right.
And we try that when we're infatuated with somebody the first few weeks of a relationship, but it's not sustainable. So we create a futility, an emptiness, and an unfulfillment, striving to be somebody inauthentic because we're minimizing ourselves and exaggerating them, and they're inauthentic and we're inauthentic. And we're in a conditional state of valency because that's a positive charge on them and a negative charge on us in relativity. Now, the same thing happens on the other side. We meet somebody that we look down on. We're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. We're resenting them. Now we're too proud to admit what we see in them is inside us. The fact is, whatever we see in them, we have, but we're not willing to own it. We're too proud to admit it. And so we're deflecting again, disowning, dismembering, and we're disempowered, now projecting our values onto them and trying to get them to live in our values, which is non-sustainable futility. So nature, this wisdom of this cosmic matrix, is letting us know through feedback that we're striving for that which is unobtainable and creating resistance to let us know that we're in a state of minimizing or exaggerating ourselves and not being ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that inauthentic exaggeration or minimization is creating symptoms of resistance and non-sustainable futility to give us feedback to let us know that's not where the magnificence is. You're not here to judge them. You have strife that way, as Empedocles said.
Yeah.
But if we go in there and ask the question, what do I see in them that I admire? And where do I do the same thing? Mm-hmm. For instance, in Romans 2:1, it talks about beware what you judge in others. You do the same thing. Mm-hmm. You take out the moral hypocrisy. You go in and identify where you've done the same thing. The thing you were too humble to admit and the thing you were too proud to admit. Where do you do the things of your hero and villain? and own it quantitatively and qualitatively. And the thing you think is a positive, what are the downsides until they're balanced? And the thing you think is negative, what are the upsides until it's balanced? And you level the playing field, and the seer and the seeing and the seen are the same, and you realize that your own set of values is displaying the same traits in your own unique way, and that's your uniqueness. That's what makes the biggest difference, being authentic, not exaggerating or minimizing. And you've taken the valency and the conditions out, and you're now in a state of unconditional love and realize that they were your teachers helping you own the parts you had disowned.
Yeah.
Now, at that moment, you're now in the state of unconditional love. You're now in your essential self, your authentic self. You're now in objectivity and equanimity about what is, what's actuality, instead of what the reality of the senses and the phenomena of your perceptions were. That, to me, is that the soul state. And that's practical, very practical. It's not some esoteric thing. It's a very practical thing. But the second we do, our autonomic nervous system is parasympathetic when we're infatuated and sympathetic when we're resentful, because we're seeking and digesting and resting, or we're fighting or flighting. And when those are perfectly balanced, we have autonomic regulation. The excitation from the sympathetic, the inhibition from the parasympathetic come into perfect balance. The EI ratios are balanced. The autonomics are balanced. The hormones and transmitters, regulators and modulators come into balance. The signal molecules at the cell level come into balance. We progress, not regress, our cellular genetic expressions and epigenetics. And we have a gamma synchronicity in the brain, which is an alpha theta junction synchronicity in Gestalt states. It's an aha to let us know and to confirm we are in a moment of authenticity. There's the soul now.
You know, we live in a world where stress is constant and distractions are endless. If you're like many of my clients juggling family, career, training, and spiritual practice, you've probably felt the toll it takes on your clarity and vitality. You may even be someone that can't get through the day without drinking coffee, even when it's not making you feel better anymore. That's why I'm excited to share something that's become part of my daily ritual, Nandaka by Peak. Nandaka means the sword of wisdom. It isn't your typical energy booster or coffee substitute. Nandaka is a sacred blend of organically grown adaptogenic and nootropic botanicals designed not to mask your fatigue, but to nourish your nervous system, feed your brain, and support deep, sustainable energy from the inside out. That's what true vitality is all about. Unlike most mushroom products that are stuffed with mycelium grown on grain, Nandaka is made from 100% fruiting bodies. That's where the medicine lives. You get the full spectrum of benefits of lion mane for mental clarity and nerve regeneration, reishi and chaga for modulating stress and inflammation, and ceremonial cacao rich in anandamide, the bliss molecule, to uplift your mood and calm your system. Even the cacao butter serves a higher purpose, acting as a delivery mechanism to carry these nutrients deep into your brain. When I take Nandaka before podcasting, teaching, writing, or conducting a therapy session, I notice something profound. The energy is steady, the focus is clean, and my creativity flows without resistance. It supports the body, the mind, and the soul all at once. And here's the truth. If your brain and nervous system are overstimulated and undernourished, you'll always be inviting burnout. That's why I don't treat the symptoms. I go to the source. And Nandaka aligns with that philosophy. I'm truly impressed with Nandaka, and that's why I'm excited to share this powerful, effective support and nourishment to help you stay vital throughout each day, to bring you many of the core nutrients most everybody's brain, nervous system, and body needs today. Currently, there are over 18,000 five-star reviews on Peak's amazing products, and Nandaka is trusted by some of the top minds in wellness for a reason, including me. These products actually work. Tune in, reconnect, nourish your core. Try Nandaka and feel the shift. Nandaka is a powerful ally, and right now you can get 20% off for life, plus a free starter kit with your first order and a rechargeable frother and helpful glass beaker for mixing your Nandaka exclusively at peaklife.com/Paul Chek. Once again, that's PIQUELIFE.com/PAULCHEK, peaklife.com/Paul Chek, for 20% off for life plus a free starter kit with your first order. Yeah, it's a beautiful it's a beautiful conception of the soul. There's no malalignment with my own conception. I think that there's different levels and layers to the soul, but I think that the origin of the soul is exactly that. I tell my students
it's the essence of our existence.
Well, I say, look, only God can give a soul, and only all God can give is what it is, and that's inherently what's in you, having the experience of life. And so the ultimate realization is that, as Saint Francis of Assisi used to say, when people would ask him, how do I find God? He would say, what you're looking for is what's looking. And there it is right there. That's what you just described in one sentence.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is when I was 18, just turning 19, and I received those books from my uncle, one of the books that I received was A Discourse on Metaphysics by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, on the very first paragraph of the first chapter, he said, no human being could ever improve upon the magnificence of what already is.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept. I'll throw you an angle on that one, though.
Anyway, they said he believed there was a divine perfection, a divine order. So I wanted to know, what is divine order? What does order mean? So that led me to the study of Clausius and thermodynamics and Boltzmann. Mm-hmm. And anybody that was in the field of thermodynamics at the time, what exactly is order versus disorder?
Right.
Claude Shannon in information theory, I think, said it better than most at MIT. And that was, when you have information missing, you have entropy.
Mm-hmm.
Disorder means missing information.
Yeah.
And when you reclaim that information by asking quality questions, you have order. My whole methodology that I developed, the Demartini method, is built on that. I've been working on it for 53 years. And the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. And what questions do is it makes you conscious of what's unconscious. And the unconscious, the part of you that's in the dark and unawakened and unenlightened, in that unconscious part, the question reveals. Your intuition is constantly trying to wake it up. But if you ask the right question, it can equilibrate that and make you fully conscious. And so when we ask a question, when you're infatuated with somebody, what are the downsides? When you're resentful to somebody, what are the upsides that you're overlooking, that you're missing?
Yeah.
The missing information is what's making you judge and have strife. Mm-hmm. But full enlightenment is the realization of the synthesis and synchronicity of all complementary opposites simultaneously.
Yeah.
And when we realize the unity of opposite that Heraclitus described when he talked about the logos, that's the inherent order of the universe that we could appreciate as the divine matrix, if you will. And whether you can use a scientific language, just call it the implicate order, or you call it the divine order, I don't really care. But that is what I've been dedicated to since I was 18. And putting a system together to help people become aware of that, because there never was anything out of order. It was all a misinterpretation of our perceptions that gave us that the assumption that there was. And neg entropy in the book, What is Life, by Erwin Schrödinger, 1944.
I read it.
He talked about negative entropy. Mm-hmm. And entropy was missing information, but negative entropy, which is life physics by Tipler, is reclaiming the information that's been missing. That's why questions are the living and holy curiosity, and awaken ourselves to quality questions to help us reveal what we're not enlightened about is the journey.
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective. It doesn't conflict with yours. I feel that chaos is itself a form of information, but it's often only chaos to us because we don't have a perceptual field to read it.
We're somehow not. It's the computational boundary that Stephen Wolfram describes. We reach a conformational boundary in our ability to ask the questions, to interpret and understand the hidden order that's actually in the chaos. The chaos is absolutely essential for our life to let us know what we haven't loved.
Yeah, just to look at this from another angle, I've had podcasts and I've studied this deeply myself, but Stephen Hawking said that nothing can make it through a black hole, not even information. And, I was having
initially.
Well, the point is that information does not need a body. It's not physical. So, and then later, yes, people did say information can survive it. The whole conception is that information is something physical. Matter can get, in black hole theory, matter gets annihilated, but information doesn't need a physical body. There's, you can't point to me and tell me where the information that makes up your mind is at. It's non-local. In
quantum theory, in unitary quantum theory, the information can never be created or destroyed. It's conserved. And so the challenge they had with relativity that Susskind is addressed at Stanford and Perimeter, they figured out their way of creating it with the holographic construct on how the information can be maintained through an entangled process. They found a way of actually solving both of those, so relativity and quantum theory can still be accounted for. So
which is very in line. That is very in line with
which Hawking, his last paper addressed. His last paper finally acknowledged that,
and it's very in line with David Bohm's hollow movement as well.
Exactly.
Well, these are amazing explorations. I wanted to ask you about some fundamental archetypes, and just you've kind of been touching on a number of the different things that I had, but I think it'd be fun to open up some of these other explorations. The imago Dei, which in Jung's conception is the image of deity or God. And speaking of it, Jung makes the statement, it's impossible to define whether your image of God creates you or you create it. One's conception of their highest power, in my experience, is the most formative influence in their life, of how they conceive of themselves and ultimately how they live. How would you describe your own imago Dei, and what are your thoughts on the influence of one's conception of any form of God?
Well, I think you said it already. I think that our conceptions expand as we hopefully grow. That doesn't mean as we get older, because we may not grow, but if we were growing our awareness, our conceptions of deity expand.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at the geocentric theory that was common in the time of Aristotle and Ptolemy, outside at the fixed stars and beyond were the deity. And then the Empyrean was the highest of the heavens. And then there was a series of heavens like Dante described and Paul described, all the way down to the earth. And the terrestrial world was originally the source of universe in those days.
Yes.
And this geocentric world was the construct. And so theology for about 5.5 billion people are still geocentric, still Aristotelian, still Ptolemaic. Now, at the time, there was a Philolaus who was a student of Pythagoras, and later Aristarchus. They had a heliocentric system back then, but Ptolemy overruled it, and Aristotle and them overruled it. It was there before the time of even Aristotle. From the 4th century and 3rd century back, it goes in 5th century even. And then Copernicus brought it back out. So the second the heliocentric system gained dominance with Copernicus and a revolution occurred, the idea of Catholic, which was universal, meant universal in religion at the time, went from the world now to the solar system.
Right.
But Thomas Wright and many other great astronomers and Galileo started looking through telescopes and started to realize those fuzzy nebulous structures out there are whole galaxies. And we're now not looking at stars after all. We're looking at galaxies upon galaxies. So now our viewpoint started to expand galactically. The Hindu, their construct of deity was much more expanded than Judeo-Christian. They saw, Brahma being like a galaxy and Vishnu dreaming innumerable galaxies and dreams and cycles of emergence and submergence. And so the Rig Veda was a much broader perspective on theology and deity than the Judeo-Christian backgrounds. And even so, we now are looking at spiral filaments of plasma interconnecting supergalaxy clusters and that being a subset of the observable universe now. So if we're not accounting for the deity on an ever more expanded level as we get farther into the reaches of astronomy, then we're not keeping current in our awareness of it. And we're stagnating with computational boundaries and moral hypocrisies and in-group, out-group biases and monolingual deities and things like that, and thinking Earth and only the Earth. There was an astrology, an astrotheology of other planets even at one time, but that was poo-pooed because of the geocentric model. So we have to live with holy curiosity. And the holy curiosity is that tomorrow, what I can learn tomorrow may expand and update my understanding of what I had yesterday. That's the journey.
Well, what you're saying is totally in line with my favorite definition of what spirituality is that I teach my students and practice and live myself. And that is that the practice of spirituality is a progressively expanding sphere of wholeness.
That's it.
And, so
you're realizing that what you are reflecting on is still you, but it's expanding on what you're now aware of that you can reflect and identify. There's no end to it. That's why when somebody says I'm enlightened, I go, okay. I'd rather say that I have a relative degree of awareness and reflection, and I have a moment of enlightenment, as Richard M. Book in his Cosmic Conscious said, only a moment of it, and then I'm off to my next delusion, and then I have a moment of awareness, and then I'm off to my next delusion. And the infinitude of what we don't know and the mysteries of what we don't know that we attempt to penetrate in our pursuit is an insignificant thing. What we know is an insignificant infinitesimal compared to what we don't know. So I become more aware of how much ignorance I have.
Well, yeah, that's the thing too. And the deeper your knowledge and wisdom goes,
the more humble you get.
Well, the bigger your questions get, and the deeper into yourself and everything you have to go to answer them. And the horizon just is always moving with you. You can't catch the horizon of God. It's impossible to do. So,
I had a fun thing. I had a gentleman who was trying to tell me that he knew God's will.
Oh, and good luck.
I said, well, that's great. And I said, I met a guru that thought that one time, and I imagine this. I put this little story together. A guru is sitting in a lotus position in India, and he's meditating. And the earth is going around at 1,000 miles an hour. And he's sitting there. I am one with the universe. I am one with the universe. I am all enlightened. I am all aware. Right? Now, if you go to the sun, which is 93 million miles away, in one astronomical unit, and you look from the center of the sun to the earth, you can't see it without a telescope.
You're right.
And you might miss it as it's going around in its darkness.
Yeah.
And there's that guy going around in 365 and 20, quarter days. I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened. And he's just spinning around like a hamster wheel. I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened.
On a potter's wheel.
Now we go to the Milky Way, 26,000 light years or 27,000 light years away.
Yeah.
And light travels 186,000 miles a second, supposedly. Yeah. And so in the process of doing that, you got 86,400 seconds in a day. So 86,400 seconds times 186,000 miles per second. And then you now multiply that times 365 and a quarter days. And then you multiply it times 27,000. That's the distance to the center of the Milky Way, right? To the Sagittarius A black hole, they say. Now, at the black hole, which was theorized as the source of singularity and deity to some, we don't see our solar system. That star is non-discernible out of 400 billion stars. It's not, you can't tell. Yeah. And the little planet is insignificant. Now you get our little Milky Way and you put it together with a local group, and then you put that as part of the Virgo cluster, and then you put it sort of the Laniakea supercluster. Then you put the Laniakea supercluster with the attractor and the void, and then you put it into the part of the spiral plasma wheel filaments. And then you put that in the cosmic web, and that's just part of the observable universe that we have.
And then you go to the multidimensional reality.
And you go to the possibility that we might have a multiverse. Now we're talking about that guy is fully enlightened.
That's a great contextualization.
Because I've been studying astronomy. When I was a kid, I used to go out and draw the star positions and the moon and everything else almost every night when I was 3 and 4. My parents thought I was weird, but I've been fascinated by astronomy and written a lot on astronomy. And the more you study that, you become both humbled as an insignificant, but also profound because it's all you. Every atom in your body is that.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's all the above. So we actually have scientific, observable, factual data to see that we're cosmic beings. There's no doubt about it. We know the Big Bang nucleosynthesis. We know mainstream, main sequence star nucleosynthesis, stellar nucleosynthesis. We know that supernova nucleosynthesis. We know where all those atoms come from and what makes up our body and its proportions and stuff.
Yes, everywhere from the whole universe.
We're cosmic beings.
Totally.
And if information is conserved, as Hawking concluded at the end, and Susskind and others have described, and Talbot, if it is conserved, then where's that intelligence not?
Well, yeah, and
if we go to the proton, the proton into the quark model is made out of 2, up quarks and a down quark, and then it's made also out of some pi and k mesons, and they're fluctuating in and out of the cosmic quantum vacuum. And so this thing is actually not even a tangible thing, but we think it is. And it's just fluctuating in a tangible form in our observation, but it's actually just a surging web of interpenetrating frequencies and wave particles that are emerging and submerging or whatever, in intermediate transition virtual particles and photons and things, all happening all in this little thing, which we call a proton. And the proton is a friggin' universe in itself. And there's billions and trillions of those sitting and making up our body. So when we stop and go to what the hell is all this? What the hell is it's nothing but information ultimately. It may be
it's energy, frequency, and information.
It may be more foundational than the actual tangible world that we think is existing.
Absolutely. I'm just now about to publish volume 1 of a 15-volume book series that has the same title as my podcast. It's called Welcome to Spirit Gym. And one of the things that I did to make a point was I researched how many subatomic particles there are now identified, and I basically found 64 of them. And then I researched to find out how many of these were actually conceived of before they were found. Well, every one of them was mathematically conceived of before they had any objective evidence for any of the ones that they had. The point I'm making in the book, and then I tell my students, is we're already projecting our consciousness into consciousness. Where, think of it as an empty screen. Whatever you put on it, you see. So it's sort of like, in metaphor, God is leading us along with breadcrumbs, and then we see what we think we've identified because it formed in a mathematical equation or something. But we're actually kind of like, a dragon that looks at its tail and thinks it's another universe, not realizing it's part of itself. We're just keep looking into ourselves, finding ourselves.
Exactly. Well, one of the books that my uncle sent me when I was 18, going on 19, was Principles of Quantum Mechanics by Paul Bragg.
Great book.
And Paul Bragg was the one that came up with the model for particles and nanoparticles.
Right. He's the one that showed it all ways out to zero.
Exactly. And he said that, and he basically showed if you took Einstein's equation and put a plus and a minus in front of it, not just equals plus and minus, because
that's true.
It has to have both.
Yeah.
So he's the one that came up with it. Well, then Carl Anderson and Yukawa, and then they finally found the positron.
Yeah.
They found the first antiparticle. But
Yeah.
like you said, it was an anticipation that they had thought in theory before. That's theoretical physics. I flew from San Francisco to Paris with Carl Brown and Vera. And so these are a married couple. He is from particle accelerators at Geneva. He was on his way to Geneva. And she was the one that is involved in dark matter, the construct of dark matter in the universe, and some particle physics. One's a theoretical physicist, one's a practical physicist. I was supposed to sleep on the plane because I was speaking in Paris that morning, right? When I got there.
Good luck with people like that hanging around.
Oh, way. We spoke 9 hours.
Yeah.
Vera finally went, Ruth finally went to sleep.
It probably felt like 5 minutes, didn't it?
Oh, man, we were on a fire. We were talking about, and this guy was metaphysical. He was he was a science, and he was also on the mystical. And he was basically saying, we're in particle accelerators, we're having to make sure that we're not theorizing things into existence.
Well, that's kind of like an eye trying to see itself. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, but I'm a firm believer that there's still an elegant beauty sitting in the laws that awe-inspiring, that have been a guide in the pursuit of wisdom.
Yeah.
And the real underlying structure of the universe, the nature of reality. And I'm a firm believer that symmetry, proportion, and order that Plato referred to still holds true.
Yes. I think there's a lot of truth in that too.
And all of the randomness that we have, I really believe is missing information. And so I've never been satisfied. I've been working in the field of the psychology area and the physiology area, and I was never satisfied. When I taught pathology many years ago, I was never satisfied with the term etiology unknown. Those are the ones I had to go to.
Yeah, that's what's been the whole driving force behind my career.
That immediately makes me go, bullshit, let's find it.
Yeah.
And I'm now way more respective of how our physiology is creating illnesses to awaken us to our distorted perceptions, to guide us back to authenticity.
Yeah.
And if we know with applied physiology what the physiology and autonomics and epigenetics are doing, we have a great idea of what it's trying to teach us. And we've got a model that's changing, that has been the idea that's palliative, not curative, and not instructive. Yeah. I think we need to go palliative to curative to instructive. Mm-hmm. And it's not even a disorder in the first place. It's actually a hidden order that we haven't asked the right questions to see it. And the moment we do, we get a realization that our physiology is trying to help us be our magnificent, authentic self.
Yeah, I think it's giving us the feedback we need. I coined
exactly.
I coined the term the pain teacher. I've been a therapist for 42 years, so I've been at it a long time. But I learned a long time ago, even from my own very bad injuries. I was a motocross racer, a kickboxer, a competitive elite level triathlete, and a lot of things. I rode in the rodeo and stock car racer, drag racer. So I've had plenty of time to visit the pain teacher. But I found that my pain was always guiding me and telling me, doctors would say, oh, well, you're crazy, quit boxing or quit racing motorcycles. It's dangerous. I'm like, yeah, you're telling me to stop living. But I would have seriously bad injuries. I was completely out unconscious with concussions from motocross racing accidents and broken bones all through me and internal bleeding. And I would just let my body tell me what to do. It would tell me what position to put it in. It would tell me, stretch this. I learned to get through all that. I just had to let my body guide me, and because the doctors didn't know what to do. And it sort of turned out that those injuries actually became the basis of my therapeutic philosophy, and to let the body be a guide, not tell it what to do, but learn to listen to the damn thing.
Exactly. I look back in life, I always say you can have the wisdom of the ages without the aging process, or the wisdom of the ages with it.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah,
reason
very
we
true.
age, the only reason we age is because we separate memory from imagination and create the arrow of time that entropy can work on.
Yes. Yeah. That's a
And
beautiful way to put it.
when we're actually present and we're not judging, we have a timeless mind, ageless body, as Deepak was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the symptomatology of pleasure or pain, which are simply lopsided perceptions, according to Anaxagoras and John Bonica from New York, if we balance the equation, I can take a pain and make a pleasure and make a pain. I can take any. I had a gentleman who was having 2.5 inches added to his height. It's one of the most painful procedures that there is. You slice the leg and you let tissue grow 1 millimeter every couple days, and you stretch it until you've grown 2.5 inches. It's painful. You know, it's not, you're doing your tibia and your fibula at the same time. And you're growing this and stretching this. It's extremely painful. So what I did is I went in there and I found out that because we have the lateral spinal thalamic tract and it goes up into the thalamus, and then from there it goes into the corona radiata and up into the cortex. The thalamus is where we actually begin to have conscious awareness of the pain. But we also have down control from the cortex. And we can shut off gates in Melzack-Walsh theory. We can turn on and turn off gates and transmitters and receptors and the boutons, and we can alter those ratios of those transmitters and change the pain level. So what I did is I took him into this excruciating pain. He was classifying it between 9 and 10, okay, because it is very painful. And I went in there and I said, okay, let's go to an exact moment you're perceiving it. And let's go in and find the submodality distinctions that it's associated with it. What color is it? What texture is it? Is it moving? How is it moving? What direction is it moving? Does it have a smell? Does it have a taste? And we identified about 20-something identified components of that pain.
Yeah.
We put that in sort of a box, and we now stored that. That's his pain representation. We took the complementary opposites, as Wilhelm once said. There's simultaneously a complementary opposite that's in our unconscious that if we get them and integrate them, the perception of pain and pleasure disappear. So I helped him identify at the exact moment of the perception of one to distinguish where the other one was. At the exact moment you're present in the moment of perception, the anti-memory is balancing the memory, just like a particle and antiparticle, it's balancing it. And I had him access those one by one and took him down to less than a 1 in pain.
Yeah.
Just by resorting how the brain is perceiving it. Then basically, I knew that as long as there's valency associated with the amygdala, because the amygdala in the subcortical region assigns valency to perception. And as long as we see positive or negative, it's going to be a pleasure or pain ratio, because one's going to get the nucleus accumbens, the other one's going to be the pain. So I went in there and I said, as long as we're in the amygdala, these are accentuated. If we go into the medial prefrontal cortex, which calms down the valence assignments by the amygdala, we can transcend it. So I asked him, what is the highest priority value that he has? And he was also a speaker. I said, go to a moment where and when you are having the most inspired presentation you've ever had, where you're saying what's in your heart, you're present, and you're coming through congruently and fluently. And he goes to this moment. And in that moment, I had him go through and re-experience that and be present with it. Not as a memory in the past, but he's there in that moment. I said, you can't feel your pain, can you? He goes, no, it's gone. I said, because if you're present and you're inspired and you're in your executive center and your valencies are neutralized, the thalamus doesn't differentiate the pain and the receptors are not active at that moment. And we got him down to a 0. He could not feel his pain. At that moment, as long as that was in his mind, he couldn't feel the pain. Well, then we went over to him. Then I went and did another exercise with him. I said, there's a conservation of valency and charge. It's conservation of charge. It's one of the principles of conservation. I said, so if you go to a moment prior to this surgical procedure, where was the pains in your life that are there prior? And he said, well, I had the pain of managing my business, and right now I'm not even focused on it. I'm recovering. I had the pain of managing my kids, getting up and doing things. I had the demands of myself. I had the wife upsetting with me. And we started listing all the pains until the quantity of the pain was in its diversified form by the law of the one and the many. It's either concentrated in one or it's dispersed in many, but it's never gone. There's always a conservation of these two polarities and the conservation. So I helped him identify where the pain was prior to the surgical procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And we identified into the quantity. And then I said, what was the drawbacks of that form? And what's the benefit of this form? And he broke down in tears. He said, I've been short most of my life, and I finally got the height that I've dreamed about. And he started crying. And he said, and in that moment, again, there's no pain in that moment. He's transcendent the perception of the thalamus. He's in the cortex beyond it. And all of a sudden he realized that he didn't gain pain. He didn't lose pain. He transformed it. The master lives in a world of transformation, not the illusions of gain and loss or pleasure, pain, or polarities. That's the amygdala. That's our kind of our animal nature. So when he actually realized that, and I had him go through, and prior to that, where was it? Prior to that, I showed him back into his childhood, the conservation of pain and the conservation of pleasure. And each moment he had pain with his wife, where was the pleasure? Each moment he had pains at work, where was the pleasure? And I showed him that these were conserved all the way through. When he was finished, without even having to be in the, quote, meditative state or be thinking or anything, it was under one.
Hi, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying the podcast. As a therapist that is constantly teaching people about nutrition and hydration, I found that the only people that really understand and use electrolytes in general are endurance athletes. But what most people don't know about is the importance of electrolytes for general health, mineral nutrition, improved hydration, blood sugar and insulin regulation, enhanced vitality, and enhanced brain function. Though there is a rising awareness of electrolytes and many companies offering them, I can assure you that they are not all created equally, and what that usually comes down to is the quality and the cleanliness of the source materials and how they are combined. Having tested many electrolyte products, I was honestly shocked when I experienced Paleo Valley's essential electrolytes. Why? Because I eat a super high quality diet and back it up with the world's highest quality whole food supplements to guarantee a full spectrum of nutrition, and I'm a lover of high quality salts, so I thought for sure I was getting enough electrolytes. When I tested other electrolyte products, I honestly felt no difference. When Paleo Valley sent me their essential electrolytes to test, I was honestly shocked at how much more energy I had. I even experienced an improved level of mental clarity that I didn't expect from an electrolyte drink of all things. Paleo Valley's essential electrolytes are a whole food sourced electrolyte blend. Get the complete benefits of trace minerals and electrolytes found in unprocessed ancient sea salt, organic coconut water, and seaweed extract without the refined sugar and synthetic ingredients in most electrolyte drinks. To get your essential electrolytes and save 15% on your order, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. If we want to make the world a better place, we've all got to stay healthy and fit and support companies like Paleo Valley because they're a perfect example of the kinds of companies we need more of in the world today. Enjoy essential electrolytes. Yeah, it's interesting too because you've done a very good job of elaborating all the regions of the brain involved in all this, but mystics and yogis and shaman have been doing this with no knowledge of brain anatomy whatsoever for thousands and thousands of years. So I think that when we have anybody that knows how to transcend perceptual limitation, regardless of what their background is or how they perceive it, the door opens as long as we can allow ourselves to follow them. I think that's a reality is that it goes to the point where, if we have good teachers and guides, they can show us how to do very miraculous things. You must be familiar with Sri Aurobindo, aren't you?
Well, Life Divine, absolutely.
Yeah.
And his other writings.
Because Aurobindo, I wanted to share something with you that's very interesting because it's very in line with everything you've been saying. Aurobindo was very aware that India was full of spiritual gurus. A lot of them were charlatans, but he knew for sure there was some very powerful real ones because he'd experienced them and seen the things they could do. So he wanted to figure out what it was that differentiated a real spiritual guru from the rest of them. And in the conclusion of his research, he identified there was 4 hallmarks of a true spiritual guru. And here they are. Number 1, they never do the healing work themselves. They always draw their power from unconditional love. 2, they could all turn a negative into a positive. 3, they could all create beyond the laws of physics. 4, they always created equanimity and harmony wherever they went. And I think, ultimately, there is no power that doesn't come from unconditional love. We all have the ability to turn a negative into a positive by changing our perception and our relationship
or
with
transcending the labels, or transcending the labels where it's neither positive. Equanimity
exactly.
doesn't require positives.
Right. Well, yeah, those are all options, but we have to take it in steps for people. And we all create beyond the laws of physics all the time. And the way I prove it to my students, I say, how high can you jump in your mind? Can you jump to the moon? They say, yeah, no problem. I say, well, there you go. That's where it all begins.
Well, I didn't experiment. This will be fun.
Yeah.
When I was 18 years old and I started getting all those books, I also got the first book given to me by my parents, my mom and dad got Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes and also Power of Positive Thinking.
Uh-huh.
So I started reading every book on self-help that was available at the time. And I got about 300 of those self-help books. And but no matter what I did, I had positive and negative. I had positive and negative thoughts.
Uh-huh.
And no matter what I was trying to do, I kept having both, either towards myself or others or something. I seemed like I wasn't getting one side. I was like trying to get a magnet and getting a one-sided magnet without the other pole, or a one-sided coin without the other tails, it's that kind of thing. And so I got frustrated, and I kept reading more and more books and trying more and more to try to get one-sidedness. And I tell people, you don't have to get rid of half of yourself in order to love yourself. No. Love is the synthesis and synchronicity of both poles. You want to embrace both the hero and the villain, the saint and the sinner. You want to be able to embrace all of you. So I then thought, well, if something's not going, I'm still having positive and negative. So then I started to go, and when I turned 20, I started going to all the teachers in positive thinking. I went to a live Norman Vincent Peale. I went to Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Earl Nightingale and W. Clement Stone and, Tremendous Jones. I met them all.
Almost all those are Christians.
Yeah. But
they're already wrapped up in polarity.
Oh, absolutely. And, I also met gurus. I was very good close friends and had a patient go to Swami Goswami, Tamal Goswami Gaudiva from the ISKCON movement, and other gurus and yogis. I got to meet Western and Eastern, but no matter what, I still found that I was trying to get rid of half of myself.
Yeah.
And trying to get a one-sided pole.
Yep.
So at age 28, I decided, screw this. I'm going to do a research project, and I'm going to really do a thorough job. Now, you're going to think this is neurotic, but I have a feling you're almost as neurotic as I am. So this probably going to relate to.
I'm curious. Put it that way.
Yeah, let's. So what I did is I went through 300 books and underlined every positive word in the books. And I came up with 2,000. If you go online, you can find a book called 2,000 Quotes, Demartini, by Demartini. 2,000 Quotes, The Wise, and a Day-by-Day Guide to Inspirational Living by Demartini. And I took 2,000 words out of the most positive words out of the English, in English, from these 300 books. And I put them alphabetically. I divided them up by 365 days. It came out to 5 to 6 of these a day. And I then meditated and came up with the most positive quote with the most positive words in English. And I wrote a book that's nothing but the positive words out of that 2,000 list with ands of these. That's all I was allowed in. So it's nothing but positive words. And then I divided that by 365. It came up to 5 to 6 quotes a day. I put 4 days worth on a page. So I had 20 to 24 quotes per page. And it was 86 pages or so in duration. And it's still available. People can go online and find this thing. I stopped selling it back then once I realized it was an illusion. But what I did is I did that, and then I created a chart. A chart was a day-by-day guide to cycle forecasting form. No, day-by-day cycle forecasting form. I put spiritual, mental, career, financial, family, social, and physical, the 7 areas of life that I broke life into. And then what I did is I divided that into 31 days, each day into 4 quadrants, 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 7 o'clock. And I divided that area of life into +1, +2, +3, -1, -2, -3, and 0 in the center. If I'm neutral, it's 0. If I feel up, like a hedonic adaptation, I feel up or down, I write where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got up in the morning and I recited and memorized the 5 to 6 quotes, and I recited them 108 times. I got that from the Japa beads of the East, and I got the Holy Rosary beads. So I decided I was going to go through 5 to 6 quotes 108 times a day. That's 540 to 648 different quotes a day. The truth is I did over 1,000 a day most of the days. I just kept going. And I recited these all day long, these most positive statements that I could ever put. Throughout the day, a beeper would go off every 4 hours, and I would go, how am I doing right now in the 7 areas of my life? Be honest. Otherwise, why waste your time doing the research? How do I feel right now, and how am I going right now spiritually? And if I'm really inspired, I put a 3. If I'm kind of despired, I put a -3. Mentally, am I sharp or dull? Financially, am I feeling abundant or lacking? In business, do I feel successful or failure? And I put the polarities on there, and I monitored them 4 times a day while I'm affirming the most positive statements and positive words so far in the English language 1,000 times a day, 1,000 quotations a day, feeding my mind on that. And then I did this for 24 months, 2 friggin' years. And at the end of it, I got a Texas Instrument calculator. You remember those? Texas Instrument calculator out. And I went through and added all the numbers, the pluses, the minuses, and everything else. When I got through, I divided by the number of entries, all the pluses and minuses, divided by the number to get an average. 0.0017, 0.0009. 0.00019, 0.0002. In other words,
tell me, I'm lost as to what you're adding up. The pluses, the positives, and the negatives.
Putting all the positives and negatives, and I'm taking all the entries 4 times a day times 31 days times 24. I'm taking all those in all 7 areas and looking at the summation of them.
Okay, yeah.
And I discovered what is called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation says we have a set point, and anytime we go above, we have homeostatic forces to bring it back down. Whenever we go below, we have homeostatic forces to bring it back up. But we need our excitation inhibition ratios, and all of our transmitters have feedback systems to bring us back into homeostasis. We get perturbed by our misperceptions of reality, but then we go back to what's actual. When I discovered that, I realized it was a waste of time trying to be a positive thinker. It was a waste of time to be a negative thinker. It is a wonderful thing to realize that you're going to have both. Both are feedback mechanisms, and they're guiding us to what we have unawareness in and what questions to ask to make us complete in our awareness again. So when I finished that, I gave up the idea of pursuing positive thinking, and I realized if I'm down, I need positive thinking. If I'm up, I need negative thinking. If you're infatuated with somebody, you need to ask, what are the downsides of that person you're infatuated with? If you're resentful to somebody, what are the upsides? If you balance the equation, there's tears of gratitude.
Yeah.
So when I had those moments of tears of gratitude and they were in the 0 point, I had confirmation of now my authenticity. My manic and my panic, my elation and my depression, my infatuation, my resentments were not the truth. They were polarized, valent, amygdala, subjectively distorted portions of reality. What was actually there was always a synthesis and synchronicity of opposites. It was the unity of opposites that Heraclitus was trying to say, the hidden order in the apparent chaos. The chaos was the missing information that I was unaware of. When I got that, I gave up the idea of the self-help movement, which is a moral trap, and a self-awareness movement, which is the realization that at any moment in time, all we have to do is ask the right question. We become consciously aware of the whole time. It's never missing.
What you've just described is very in line with a synthesis of Taoism that I teach. And it sounds simple, but it takes some focus to do it. And I say, not too much, not too little. That is the way of the Tao. And so the secret is, not to get overly wound about anything, or, like kind of allow a process to unfold, but quit amplifying values.
And be present with it.
Yeah.
Aristotle said when he talked about vices and the golden mean, the true virtue in the center, it was the center between excess and deficiency. The excess of positives with the deficiency of negatives. These are called false positives. The amygdala is noted for its confirmation bias, disconfirmation bias, false positives, false negatives, in order to accelerate the adrenaline to capture prey and to escape predator. So it's designed by the amygdala to distort reality and create the phenomenal reality that our senses are stuck in. The nominal state, the transcendent nominal state that Kant was describing, is the one that's the integration of those two. The medial prefrontal cortex is designed for the integration center of those pairs of opposites, the unity of opposites. Heraclitus did a magnificent job on the writers that followed him, summarizing this awareness that the Stoics tried to use. They all tried to understand that this unity of opposites, this logos, which they called Christ and John in the Christian writings, they gave him the term the logos because his statement was equanimity. Which is the Taoist state. The Taoist state is the state of equanimity. Anything you're infatuated with occupies space and time in your mind and creates an intrusive thought and makes it insomnic. Can't sleep because you got a fantasy, dwelling on this fantasy. Anytime you resent something, it occupies space and time in your mind and it has intrusive thoughts and it creates resentment. Those polarities are creating insomnia to let you know you're not centered, you're valent, you're in your amygdala, you're an authentic state, you're not integrated, and it's letting you know with the symptomatology to guide you back if it's interpreted properly. But we want to go and run our narrative, and we want to be caught in our amygdala sometimes, and we want to run the story that that's a bad thing or a good thing, and we get caught in absolute moralities and trap ourselves in the in-group, out-group biases of that perception projection, instead of being aware of the whole at that moment. And knowing how. And that's why the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions. And quality questions are ones that make us aware of what we're unconscious of when we're interpreting things in this polarized way.
You know what you're reminding me of as you're talking is I keep having this memory fly back at me. Do you remember when Stephen Hawking, he tried to describe, because he is another one like Dirac that said the net balance of the universe is zero. And so if you think of your conception of positive thinking and everything you've just said, Stephen Hawking said something that goes totally in line with what you're saying. He said, let me explain. He was trying to explain it to lay people. He said, let me explain how it actually works. If you want to create he says, imagine you're standing in your yard with a shovel and you want to create a 3-foot pile of dirt. You're going to dig a hole and you're going to have a big pile of dirt. But right there is going to be a 3-foot hole. And so whenever you create a positive, you have to simultaneously create a negative and vice versa, because they create each other. So it's I think a meditation for everybody listening is just to watch and just spend some time being aware of where we're digging holes and piling shit up to bang into.
That's it. Well, there's a thing called the law of heuristic escalation in chaos theory. And the law of heuristic escalation says that anytime you try to project an ideology onto somebody to give what you think is order, the explicate order, you create an equal and opposite force that counterbalances it to create an ideology that's creating what they think the explicate order is. And the two together create the disorder because both are incomplete. It's like a dialectic. They're both don't have the knowledge of the other one, and they both are there to teach them, and so they fight. to eventually discover the implicate order that was there the whole time, which is a synthesis and synchronicity of complementary opposites. And so when people say they're depressed, I just had a research done at Bristol on my work, and they just came to the realization that we were able to dissolve these depressions. But the reason why we dissolved their depressions, and in this study that we did, is because we dissolved their fantasies. We dissolved their elations. And anytime you expect, I would say depression is a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy you're addicted to, and the fantasy you're addicted to has more positives and negatives, and therefore your life in comparison to this fantasy is now depressed. But if we go in there and find out what the depression is, find out what the opposite is, find the drawback of the opposite and the benefit of this, and bring them both into balance, they can't feel depression. It's just really that simple. But we go through and we make a big thing. We say, well, it's a biochemical imbalance. Well, the pharmaceutical companies love that. They make money off that.
That's a
but the reality is you have the capacity to transform your perceptions, decisions, and actions. That's what William James was trying to tell. And we don't take accountability. We want to dissociate and blame things and give credit to things on the outside instead of embrace that it is all a projection and it's a reflection of what's in the inside.
This makes me want to ask you an interesting question, and I have another question for you too, a lot of them, but I'll ask you this question: have you ever read anything by Edward Edinger, MD, a famous Jungian analyst and psychiatrist? You'd love his work. He was one of the people that could really explain Jung in a way that a lot of people that couldn't understand Jung could understand him. Edward Edinger defined consciousness as a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. And I don't think I need to really give you a background on that. Obviously, you're hip to all this. So what I'm leaning to and sort of opening up here for your thoughts, feelings, and just to put on the table is, we really need to have the undulations of relative positive and negatives in order for there to be an experience, or nothing moves.
Existential world. The whole existential world depends on the war of opposites, as the Mahabharata said.
Yeah.
That is the father of all manifestation, is the pair of opposites. But the pair of opposites are entangled simultaneously, regardless of the illusion of space and time that separates them. It's still a unity of opposites.
Well, they're inherently nested in the potential of zero, which is unconditional. That's the symbol for unconditional love, as far as I see it.
That's exactly.
So I think
so the existential world, I always say that this whole extracts out space and time from the mind and creates the essential self. The mind adds space and time to the soul and creates the existential self. The existential self is a subcortical valency monitor that basically puts positive and negatives together and puts things in space and time, because the hippocampus stores things with place, direction, distance. They have cells for the location, distance, etc. It creates the existential illusion. But the essential self is that 0 point, that complete integration of opposites. I developed a method. I call it the alchemy of the mind, but it's a method that I've been working on since 53 years, the Demartini method, that is designed to ask questions cognitively, to hold you accountable, to take you to a state of synchronicity and synthesis, where there's no valency, there's awe and speechlessness. You can't even speak. And there's just grace with tears. There is a scientific, reproducible, demonstrable way of reaching that point. Some people do it through meditation and breathing and chanting, and they all work. But I want to make something methodical. I want to take science and religion and unite them.
Yeah, well, that's important.
True science and religion do not fight. Pseudoscience with bias and pseudo-religion constantly fight, because they're caught in the valencies and the opinions and the limitations of empiricism and the sensory limitations and hallucinations we're trapped in, and the biases we interpret. So we have to be able to transcend even those biases to reach that synchronous. And the only way to do that is not just a dialectic, which is an oscillation in time and space, but an actual synchronicity of the anti-memory simultaneously. They have to be simultaneous. As long as there's space and time, there's still judgment, there's still entropy there. So I've developed a method on how to access the unconscious at the same moment of the conscious. So the pairs of opposites are united, and there's a confirmation of tears of gratitude when they're found. You can't fake it. It's there. And that, to me, is the way of demonstrating this field of intelligence, if you want to call it that, that's ever present, that is omniscient and omnipotent. It's there, and it's a way of demonstrating it. So true science doesn't fight that. The pseudosciences that are fighting as an atheist, I always say that the theists are as much atheist as the atheists are theist. They're in the yin and yang.
There's your positive and negative dancing together.
Yeah. They're dancing together.
Putting on quite a show. I'd like to know what your conception of spirit is. And I ask this because you could be mistaken for somebody who is a brain is consciousness guy, for how much you refer to parts of the brain. So I'd like to know.
I taught neurology in my 20s, so I was a neurology teacher. So I've been studying. I wrote a big textbook on the brain a couple of years ago. Again, updated it. So but I've studied 300 different disciplines. I study astronomy and physics and mathematics, and I'm polymathic. But the brain is our vehicle, you might say, and the most useful, because if we kill the brain, you're not too conscious without a brain.
Well, not here. I've been.
No, you're not conscious in the physical form. So yeah. I use the brain as a vehicle of mediation, even though the hard problem is never solved. But the closest I've found to approximating the hard problem, in my feeling, is biophoton virtual particle interfaces with the positive and negative valencies on the cell walls of the cells and the fields that it generate. That's where it seems the information is being stored. And to me, I believe there's a way of actually taking what we do have and coming up with a model that allows us to have a emergent behavior, allow us to come with the neurological synaptic models. I've got at least 90 models that I have on neurology that's about consciousness. None of them are sufficient, but there is something that unifies them. And that allows that one little virtual particle transition between consciousness and photons and consciousness and actual charged particles, the conditional and unconditional state of information. That is not something that is underlies any of the neurological secondary neural correlates associated with the brain. So I try to learn as much as I can and keep at the cutting edge of it as best I can. I don't want to say it's an answer. I'm just saying that it's the closest we got so far. Let's keep moving.
Well, I think another way, my own conception, because of my own deep experiences, is that you can solve the hard problem of consciousness by just realizing that matter is the condensation of consciousness. It's the crystallization of it. So you don't have to separate the two. Like if I'm an artist.
How do you make the matter? The matter, if you take a photon, it can be converted into positrons and electrons. Gamma photons can be converted.
Yeah.
But in that conversion, there's transitions. It goes from a photon through a transitionary state called a virtual photon to consciousness. And from consciousness, it goes then to virtual particles into real particles. They don't just go from one to the other, because one's a boson and one's a fermion. And the statistical probability from going from bosons, where you have an infinite number of bosons occupying 1 over infinity space with no Pauli exclusion principle and no uncertainty principle, to all of a sudden Pauli exclusion principles in space and time. And now you have the classical world of the matter itself. We realize that there's a transition there, and they've now figured out that transition, another step forward. And that goes on in every brain cell known.
Yeah. You can even step behind that, in my opinion, and look at the conception. If God is unconditional love, that's mathematically or symbolically zero.
Zero. The 0 point is between those two.
Well, listen, let me finish. You're jumping in and you won't hear my point. listen, if God is unconditional love, God has no mind. Mind requires a duality. It has to be a this, that, a something here and a something there, a male, a female. There is no mind. Mind cuts. The alchemists called it the logos cutter for a reason.
Right.
There's only one thing God can do, and that's dream itself into existence. And in the dream, relationships emerge, just like when you're dreaming, you say, oh my God, there's my mother in my dream, or there's me and doing something in my dream. And therefore, you have the manifestation of seeming reality and tangibility in the dream. And that just, if you have enough processing power, imagine God's got infinite processing power, infinite processing speed, infinite information access, and infinite everything. God's dream crystallizes into consciousness, and there's no way for God to get out of the dream. So the rock has as much God in it as a mystic and a guru. It's just a different manifestation of it and a different level of complexity. So, my only point is that we can contextualize this through quantum physics. We can do it through mathematics. We can do it through poetry. We can do it through art. We can do it through dance. If you go deep enough into any of these pathways into spirit, you can come up with a way to relate to it. But I think
that point, that consciousness point, before it goes to photons through virtual photons, or it goes into particles and virtual particles to particles, that point is mindless.
Yeah.
It's the synthesis and synchronicity of all unities that the mind had created.
I personally, from my studies, find the closest conception to what that point really is the Nada Bindu point, well described in Tantra. I think it's beautifully described.
It's the mandala or the yantra. It's the Bindu point.
Yeah. I think
that's even the point itself is an infinitesimal.
It is. And I think, we have Planck length, and people think that's the point at which you leave the explicate order into the implicate order. A lot of scientists think that. I think, no, it's the Nada Bindu point. I think all these subatomic particles are just emerging really out of Nada Bindu points, and that is the infinitesimal, infinitely
that's
small.
That's Transplanckian. We call it Transplanckian.
Yeah,
physics.
It's Transplanckian, exactly. Yeah, I when I studied Tantra, and I've read several excellent books, and having studied Bohm and all the people you're talking about, I thought, you know what? This is the most beautiful description, because if you think that when God dreams, it manifests just like a plasma screen TV, but it manifests from Nada Bindu points. And if you take that and couple it with a beautiful definition of God that Joseph Campbell gave, and it comes from originally, probably even earlier than that, I forgot the mathematician's name, you'll know it. God is a sphere whose circumference is nowhere and a center whose presence is everywhere. And the Nada Bindu is the center whose presence is everywhere. And so I think that it's a beautiful.
I think that true religion and true science are not separate.
Mirroring each other.
They're mirroring each other with just a different language.
One's poetry and one's a ruler.
Well, but it's like we have a left and right brain. We have both sides of analysis and synthesis.
Yeah.
We have the empirical and we have the deduction. We have both for a reason.
Yes.
And to me, when those are integrated, we have something of meaning.
Yes.
It's the mean between the pairs of opposites. And as you describe it, it's the Bindu point. It's the zero. It's the place. As long as there's a duality, it's still a mental game. But the synthesis and synchronicity of all complementary opposites. I like to think of it this way. We live in a universe with an infinite variety of forms of a synthesis and synchronicity of complementary opposites at all scales of existence for eternity.
Yeah.
And what greater love? It's all love.
Totally.
In his participatory universe, claimed it was love. He had a mathematical formula for love. Yeah. And so there's nothing but love. All else is an illusion of a mental construct.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a formula for love and for consciousness too. It's basically, I call it God sex, spirit times 0 equals Om. And it's just God looking into itself creates the song and the dance and the dream. And it's anytime you multiply anything or divide anything by 0, you get 0. But what people forget, I say to people in my classes, I say, okay, look, I want you to write down with your pencil or your pen, 0 times divided by X equals 0. And keep doing it until you realize what you're doing. And it sometimes takes them forever to figure it out. I go, well, even though 0 times divided by anything equals 0, if that's true, then there should be nothing here if God is unconditional love. But what's happening is you're going through a process, and the universe and life is the process of God multiplying and divided by itself infinitely. And so you're the process.
They're popping in and out of existence like a quantum virtual particles, and we momentarily think we're enlightened.
That's why I call it God sex. Everything is God sex.
Why not? Why not? You know, people have an issue with sexuality, but
that's their problem.
Unity of opposites.
Yeah, that's how it all happens.
It's the hugs and slugs and the smiles and frowns of existence.
People have a problem with everything, but that's just something that keeps them busy because they're not asking big enough questions.
There's a hierarchical structure of values in each individual based on their voids. And there's a whole spectrum of values across the planet, what some people call good and other people call evil. And the synthesis of those cancel each other on the planet. The summation of all the values and moralities on the planet counterbalance it, as Michael Montaigne described. But we go through and get trapped in our own local view, and then we make that right. And then the opposite that we run into, we typically marry them. I always say that the purpose of marriage is to find somebody that's got the complementary opposite set of values so you can delegate low priority things and get cheap labor value and have somebody to talk to at night to help you go to sleep.
Don't forget the sex.
Well, that's the unity of opposites. They both players are playing on.
Oh my God. I have 2 wives, so my arrangements allows me more complexity.
Well, you know, the factorial of 1 factorial is 1, 2 factorial is 2, 3 factorial is 6, 4 factorial is 24. It just keeps getting more complex. So yeah. I stick with 1 at a time. I can barely handle. I'm too dumb to be able to handle more than 2. More than 1.
My students always say, I want to have 2 partners. I say, well, you better learn to ride 1 horse really good before you try riding 2.
Exactly.
I was wanting to hit on something. We've kind of touched on it in many ways, but I think it's worth bringing up. You know, I know Aubrey Marcus quite well. I've been on his podcast 5 times, and I found out that your discussions with him on evil create quite a shitstorm. So,
God. Well, he cut and pasted what I said and put it out of context in order to do some clickbaiting. And that's great. I mean, I got attacked and told me that I was going to go to hell, and I told that I was going to be killed, and I mean all the basic stuff that comes with it. But I also thought it stirred up some things, and you know, stirring things up and making people emotionally react is also makes them study and learn and go and explore. So
exactly.
I gave him a big hug and a kiss at the end. I don't know if you saw it.
No,
but we had some fun. He did not want to go down the same alley because he was a little bit more of an absolutist than I was. But yeah, I'm grateful. We had some fun. But at the very end, if you look to the very end of the podcast, I'm giving him a kiss on the neck, and I'm having fun with him and hugging him. So we got along pretty good at the end.
Cheers. A little tobacco and herbs for me here.
Millions of people are carrying parasites, and most don't even know it. In fact, the chances are good that you have 1 or more parasites inside you right now, leeching off your nutrients and strength. But before you get all freaked out about it, here is some good news. Organifi's Parasite Cleanse Kit contains a unique and specialized blend of carefully chosen natural elements that help locate, kill, and remove unwanted guests and pests from the body. Like a magnet finding iron in the sand, these ingredients adhere to the toxins and parasites and pull them out of hiding, ultimately removing them from your body. This two-step combination of 100% natural ingredients includes the Parasite Cleanse capsules and the Bind and Restore tincture, creating an easy-to-use cleanse that is perfect to help get rid of your unwanted guests. Now is a great time to try Organifi's Parasite Cleanse Kit and save 20%. Go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20 and use the code Chek20 for a 20% discount.
You and I have actually really thoroughly discussed the issue of evil already without actually mentioning the word. But I just wanted to, for the audience, because I think that word is very, very well used, and there's a lot of stigma around it and misunderstanding around it. And I think religion has, especially the Abrahamic religions, have really dressed that up quite well. And I think it leads to a lot of challenges in people's life because of the way they relate to it and label things as evil. So I just thought I would just put it on the table and see what you want to share. I have a whole bunch of conceptions on it because I've investigated this myself, and I'm not only have done a lot of deep spiritual work, but I've done a lot of deep plant medicine ceremonies and investigated. I use it as a means of investigation. And I've asked my spirit and my soul and my highest self and my unconscious, every part of me, for its conceptions on evil. Excuse me. Why don't you share what your conception of it is, if you want to?
An incomplete awareness of a mental construct.
Now, I understand from your conversation with Aubrey that he asked you something like, well, if someone rapes your daughter or something like that.
I've had the opportunity to work with people, 1,300 cases or now more, that people have been raped. And I don't start with the idea that something's good or evil. I start with the idea of the facts on the table of what actually occurred.
Right.
I find that way more, if you label it one way and it becomes an absolute moral construct, you trap people. And so because I can take somebody who's been through an event like that and ask them some questions and make them cognizant and make them realize the upsides to it, the benefits out of it, what they're going to use it for, how
that's
they were
the secret.
Yeah. And so I didn't say that rape is good. An absolutist will say, if you say something's bad and not bad, they assume it's good.
Right.
I never said it was good.
Yeah.
I don't label rape good or bad. I label it an act, and we break it down to what it is, and each act is slightly different. And then I look at what are the variables involved in that setting, and then I look at how do we use that now to do something extraordinary with our life. I'm not saying that, you can be a victim of history all your life, or you can be a master of destiny. You can see things in the way or on the way. So I don't like to label it that way, because then you're basically in a contradiction within yourself. How do I find a blessing out of evil? It goes back to theodicy. It goes back to justifying evil in the world. I don't even waste my time on that, because there's two sides to everything. If I took somebody in front of you here on the show who has been through that experience and showed them, what do you perceive? Not what is the label, rape, but break it down. Rape is usually broken down into 18 different items. Each case could be much less. Threat, deceit, constraint, injury or harm,
torture.
There may be torture. Sometimes it's the people you were close to. Your boyfriend is sometimes the one that does it. More rapes come from that than anything. Yeah, and 25% of the population have been raped. That's hard to comprehend, but it's a very high percentage. So if I go and I break it down into its components, and then ask, where have you tried to constrain somebody?
Right.
And have reflective awareness, I assure you they find it.
If they're honest, yeah.
They're too proud to admit it at first and want to point their finger. But when they actually look at where have you constrained somebody
Yeah.
and break it down to its components, and then where have you deceived somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Where have you pushed somebody to do something they don't want to do without their real consent? And break them all down. I don't have any problem helping people find that. They don't usually have any resistance finding those things in their life. And when they do that, I said, the reason we're doing that is we don't want to judge somebody on the outside for something we're doing on the inside, unless we live in a moral hypocrisy. So let's first reflect and find out where we're doing the things that we're judging. And in that process itself, a portion of the charge on that event already subsides.
That's legitimate shadow work.
That's it. Well, if you want to call it shadow work from Jung, that's it. I've been doing that for 48 something years now.
Yeah.
And then what happens is if you go to the next step, and now that you've done it, no one will move a muscle, as Epictetus said, without a motive. No one ever do anything unless they perceive there's more advantage and disadvantage. Even the guy on jihad who's a Muslim radical, who believes him going and killing infidels is God's work and the greatest good he can do, in his mind, he's doing what he thinks is good.
I know.
Somebody who's thinking that he's killing people may think he's evil, but they're two different value systems. When Trump knocked out Soleimani, the general of Iran, in America, we celebrated the death of a terrorist, and we thought that was a good thing.
Right.
Well, the collection of
collectively,
people.
Yeah.
But in Iran, 5 million people came out and mourned it. They mourned his death because he was a hero, a general there.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought what we did was evil. We thought what he was doing was evil.
Right.
These are the boxes that we get caught in. So when I go in there and I have them own the traits, I call it reflective awareness. And I don't find people, I've done 1,300 cases of this, and I've got thousands of my facilitators I've trained around the world that have done this. When they find that, they stop and they kind of take some of the edge off the valency. And they kind of go, who am I to be judging this person? I've done the same thing, kind of like a Christian message there. Then I go in there and now go to the moment when they actually tried to constrain you. And in that moment, what were the benefits? What decisions did you make?
I think, John, that I agree with you. I know this is very hard for a lot of people to digest, but I think you have to have a fair level of what I would call spiritual courage and spiritual adulthood to look at exactly what you're saying and really see the truth of it. You have to be willing to accept it, because the tendency is, as you know, is to project the parts of ourselves that we don't want to engage and don't want to take responsibility for onto a scapegoat. And I think that's really the problem. It's really a strong issue of projection from a psychological point of view. And, I think I've talked about evil in a number of my podcasts with some very deep people like Father Sean O'Leary and others, but and sometimes people misunderstand me. They'll write things, I can't believe that you are approving of evil. I'm not approving of evil. I don't like evil as much as the next guy. I just want to make sure that I'm not doing it too. And I do my best to, my philosophy, my guiding principle is use your heart to feel what you know. And I find that as long as
the key is to use your heart and not your feelings. There's difference.
Well,
your heart opens when you're balanced. Your feelings of emotion come out when you're charged with an instinct to avoid something that you label evil.
Well, yes, and Jung would take it a step further, and he would say most of what people call emotions are really values trespasses. So it really depends on what your values are, and now you run into a huge quagmire of conflict there.
Got it. It's murky. It's murky.
Yeah, it's very murky.
So when I go in and I go into this situation, this is mind-blowing. I have a segment where I actually get the synthesis and synchronous of opposites. So at the moment when this constraint's occurring, where in your mind are you free? You know what their mind does? It dissociates from this constraint, creates a fantasy world where they're flying or they're birds flying, or if it's dark, they'll see light. If they're constrained, they'll imagine birds flying freely in the sky, or they'll fly dissociating with astral traveling or whatever. In that moment, The mind actually has both. When I make them take that dissociation and the association that they have with the pain, or the dissociation from the pain and the association to the pleasure, and I put them together simultaneously, tears of gratitude come out.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the pain of that experience is gone. And if I do that through each step on each component of that, when they're done, they're in a state of thank you, grace. They're no longer judging it. And they realize that the evil was that which challenged their values. The good is the fantasy that's supporting it. They're addicted to a fantasy that's supporting it. They're addicted to the anti-rape. They're attracting the rape mechanism in their life to set them free from these polarizations, which is stopping them from their authenticity.
That was, you just touched on what I was going to say next. And that is, do you feel that at a conscious or unconscious level, people attract experiences into their life that they might label evil, but have some means of opening us? For example, Rumi said the function of a broken heart is to let the love pour out. So do you feel that we are at a soul level bringing towards us what we need to facilitate our own spiritual evolution?
That's it. As long as we're in the valency of the amygdala and we're striving for prey without predator. If you get prey without predator, you get gluttonous, fat, and lose fitness. If you get predator without prey, you get emaciated, starve, and lose fitness. You must have prey and predator. So if you're addicted to protection, you attract the aggressor. You're addicted to innocence, you attract the perpetrator. Whatever you're addicted to, you attract its opposite to bring those into equilibrium. But people think that one is good and the other is evil. But the good and evil are the two poles that synthesize into love. And they're only labels that we impose on things that are exaggerations instead of the synthesis that's love. And so the very thing that you take the person you love the longest, that you've been with for 10, 20, 30, 40 years or whatever, they're going to hug and slug you. They're going to be doing nice and mean. They're going to be kind and cruel. They're going to be positive and negative. They're going to be competitive and cooperative. They're going to play every pair of opposites that are going on. And welcome to what love is. And
exactly.
People are so immature that they're addicted to a one-sided fantasy, and the other side is there to break their addiction.
I tell people all the time, is one of the most common things people ask me is, how do I find my soulmate? I said, you probably aren't going to find your soulmate until you're ready, because what you don't realize is the soulmate is the one that will call you on your shit every time. And you'll probably end up divorcing them because you're not ready for that level of truth in your life.
You just nailed it. I always say this, the soulmate, I'm gonna share the story because you just brought up a good one. So I'm flying on American Airlines from Houston, Texas to Las Vegas to go speak to quite a few thousand doctors. And I get on last on a plane. I usually get on first or last. This time I'm getting on last. And I'm sitting in the business area, and there's two seats there. And next to me is another 27-year-old blonde, blue-eyed babe. And I don't care what it is, no matter what age it is, having that opportunity to sit next to beauty is always a stimulant. It's always a stimulant.
Yeah. I say beauty will always test your morals.
Yeah. Well, it'll strengthening your muscles.
Yeah. Some of them, yeah.
So anyway, I said to, hi, I'm John. She says, hi, I'm Tina. I said, where are you from, Tina? She says, Las Vegas. I said, great. She said, where are you from? I said, well, I'm originally from Houston, but I travel extensively now. What do you do? She says, well, I'm a cosmetologist for a haircutting and salon and everything at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. And I said, great. And so I said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a traveler and speaker, and I harass people on planes. It's my specialty.
You're good.
So she said, I said to her, I said, so what are you working on in your life? What's the highest priority thing you're pursuing right now in your life? Just an interesting question. She says, I'm looking for my soulmate.
No, good. I got to hear this.
Yeah. I said, great. And I said, how would you like to meet your soulmate today? And she said, she leaned back and kind of withdrew. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, how would you like to meet your soulmate today? Well, I don't understand that. I said, well, I can help you awaken yourself to your soulmate. if you're interested. And she goes, well, what do you need to do? I said, I'm going to just ask you some questions. She's like, what kind of questions? I said, like,
She's afraid already.
She's afraid that I'm going to impose on her. I'm the soulmate. I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
So I said, what are you looking in a soulmate? And in those days, there were jackets. You put the little ticket in, and you slid it in.
Yeah.
So I pulled over the jacket and I wrote on the back the best I could. I said, what are you looking for in a soulmate? She's looking for a man who's highly intelligent. Well, that's pretty predictable. You're not going to want a dumb dude, So highly intelligent. Great. What else? Somebody that's fit and good looking. Great. And I'm writing these down. And of course, I'm having some fun with it, putting some flair in it, and having some fun with it. And she lists 22 different items that she's looking for in a guy. I said, great. These are all predictable. The 7 areas of life. You're looking for somebody that's fit. You're looking for somebody that's intelligent. You're looking for somebody that's got ambition. You're looking for somebody that's got wealth and resources. You're looking for somebody that wants to have a family with you. You're looking for somebody that's socially connected and savvy, somebody that's inspired by something, the classics, right?
Yeah.
So these are all 27-year-old type of stuff. So she was about 27, something like that. The classical stuff you would predict at 27 years old, the fantasies. Yeah. Wrote them all down. I said, great. 22. Now, let's write the exact opposite of that. And we wrote the exact opposite. So now we've got a list of 22 positive and negative traits that she would seeks and avoids.
Yeah.
The soulmate search image and the anti-soulmate anti-search image.
Yeah.
The things that support her value structure and challenge her value structure. I said, great. Now, maximum growth and development occurs at the border. You never get one without the other. So if you're really ready for the soulmate, you have to be able to embrace both of them equally.
Yeah.
And not search one over the other, or you're not prepared. You're immature. You're still in your amygdala.
Yeah.
So let's now I want to share with you this. And she's, I have to have this, that. I said, have you ever been in a relationship that didn't have some other side to it? No.
Right.
That's a great. So now, nothing's ever missing in your life. Your soulmate is with you 24 hours a day, your whole life, without you realizing it. So who is now providing you the intelligence that you're looking for? And she goes, my boss. He's extremely brilliant. And he comes in, I cut his hair, and he owns the MGM Grand Hotel. He's an extremely brilliant guy. I love conversation with him. I said, does he represent the intelligence? Yeah. And a couple of other clients I've got. Okay, so if I put the quantity of intelligence, can you see that you're not missing that now? She goes, yeah, it's interesting. But yes, I have that. My life has that present. Right? Yeah. You either have it in one or many forms, but it's never missing. If you are wounded by the many, you move it into the one. If you're wounded by the one, you move it into the many as a way of getting through and adjusting until you learn to love the parts you haven't loved. So I said, can you see you got that? And I went through and who had this sense of humor. This little gay guy that cut hair next to her. He was hilarious, kept her in stitches all day. He had the sense of humor she always wanted in a man. And then she has this guy that's got money. Well, that's the owner again. He had billions, right? Owner of MGM Grand Hotel and casino. So everything, we went down and she found out every one of the things she was looking for until quantitatively it was equal. Not quality, because she would like to have it in one man for her, but it was in her life.
Yes, it was.
And then I said, now let's go and take the opposites. And we did the same thing on the opposites. Now, I've only got 2.5 to 3 hours on this flight, so I'm having to work fast and hold her accountable. Who's got the opposite? And we identified both of those were in her life. In some cases, more than one person. Some cases, one person had both sides. She saw it.
Yeah.
I said, now you realize that everything you're searching for is already present.
Yep.
And as long as you think it's not, you're expecting it in a form that doesn't match your values.
Right.
You're subordinating to something you read in a book, or some person you think's got a better life than you, or somebody that's got a husband that you don't see behind the scenes, what's really going on, that you think's a better deal. And so you're missing out on what's already present because you're comparing your current reality to a fantasy about how it should be, ought to be, supposed to be.
And she's probably not willing to be the equal of that either.
Yeah, but that was next.
Yeah.
So now I said, because until you believe you have that, you're not going to feel worthy of those manifestations. That's right. Anyway.
That's exactly right.
I said, so now that we've got that, now the reason why you have it diversified between these 9 individual men is because you've been wounded when you were with one.
Mm-hmm.
So you assume that I don't want to go through that again. So let's go back to your relationships you've had, and let's identify the one that you've had that's the longest one, and we'll trace ourselves back. And the last one she had was a guy that was really good looking, but was constantly looking at every other woman, constantly getting hit on by other girls, constantly needing to be the center of attention. And it was just nonstop distraction. And she said, I don't want to ever deal with that again. So she's now put the good looking guy into her clients that pay her.
So it's safer.
And look up to her and honor her and wanting her service and her contact and touch and affection. And they probably have her orgasms in her chair, and all this stuff. And so got what she goes, well, now I think about it, that's not a bad deal. I'm getting paid by the other one. I had to fight for, and he wanted me to pay for shit. And I said, exactly. You unconsciously strategize the manifestation of your soulmate in the form that you're prepared and ready for.
Exactly.
In your awareness.
Yep.
Now, when you finally realize that each of those wounds you've had in the past, you're dissociated from it and created it in the form you have it now, you're now empowered to realize you created it.
Yeah.
And if you change these wounds and open up and allow it to be in whatever form, you now have the most probable state ready for a soulmate. Now, let's go find out the next step is, where do you display and demonstrate each of those so you're not even needing somebody on the outside? Because when you don't have any urgency to get that, that's when they're there.
That's when they show up.
That's when they show up.
Too good.
Anyway, when she got through, we got off the plane. I said, I got a limo taking me over to the Bellagio across the street from you. If you want, you can go with me. If you don't, that's fine. So I dropped her off there, got her card. 3 weeks later, a man from Israel came into the hotel, came in for a haircut. Good looking, intelligent, running a major business, travels, doesn't want her to stop her career, because that's what she stopped. When she got with a really wealthy guy last time, he said, you don't need to work. And she stopped her career, and then he dumped her.
Yeah.
She lost respect. And then she's now having to start and scramble and get her business up again. So she finds it, and she sends me a picture of her and this guy. And she said, I'm in a different place because of that conversation.
Yep.
3 years, about every quarter, I'd get an update from them. And then I'd never heard from them again. For some reason, it disappeared. I don't know what happened after that. But 3 years she was with that guy, and it was more of a stable dynamic. And she didn't give up her career. She didn't give up her life. She didn't have to be somebody different to be with a person. She was able to be herself around the person who was also able to be himself. And she wasn't so much attached whether he's got to be there all the time or he's got this or that, because she realized that nothing was missing. At the level of the essence of the soul, nothing's missing. At the level of the existence of the senses, things appear to be missing. The things that appear to be missing are the things we're too proud or too humble to admit that we see in others that we don't own in ourselves. And the others is anything tangible in the universe that we've perceived separate from our own being.
Yeah. And that is inherently necessary for love to exist. God has to create that, or there is no capacity for God to experience love.
We don't even have a way of knowing our existence. Exactly.
Yes, that love and consciousness come from the same root. What's pretty interesting for me is you said you wrote down 22 things. Do you know what archetype 22 is in tarot?
Oh, no, I don't. What's that? What's the 22?
It's the Fool. It's God going on a journey to find it, explore it, experience itself.
Right. Well, I think we're all 22s in that respect.
Yeah, we are. That's the whole point of it being the beginning of tarot. It's God. It's because there's 22 archetypes, but it goes from 1, the magician, to 21, the world. But it starts with 0.
It's the 22nd one.
0 is the 22nd archetype.
My former wife, who passed away 22 years ago, almost 22 years ago.
22.
Yeah, she was very much a mystic. And she had her own tarot card. She designed her own tarot cards.
That's great. I teach tarot.
And now that you wake me up on this, he had the 22, and now it all makes sense.
Yeah. One thing that I wrote a little symbol on my page, just to loop back for a second, because we were talking about evil. I drew a little picture of the Ouroboros, the dragon or the snake eating its own tail. And what exactly. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say, the tail that's getting eaten thinks it's evil, but the part that's doing the eating thinks it's good because
Exactly.
without that eating,
it's
there's
the illusion.
It can't exist.
It's the illusion of separation.
Yeah.
It's the amygdala. The amygdala assigns valency and separates the inseparables, divides the indivisibles, labels the unlabellables, names the ineffable, and polarizes the unpolarizables. It's the amygdala that subjectively biases and distorts it with false positive negatives in order to capture prey and avoid predator.
Yeah.
It's a survival mentality. All of morality is a survival mentality.
Yeah.
Because the divine perfection doesn't even have those labels.
No, it doesn't. If it did, it would eliminate its ability to have experience.
It's in the paradox of the theodicy again.
Yes. Yeah. You're a fun guy to have a dialogue with. I'll tell you, man, it's been a good ride. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I've got some deadlines I've got to meet, but I've really enjoyed this, John. I'm really grateful for you and for the depth of you. As I was listening to you, I'm like, you're about as close to a non-dualist as I've ever met who can actually live and think a lot of non-dualists out there are just talking a bunch of silliness, but you are especially for a Western guy, you're pretty well like balanced in that non-dual conception
my whole life. Since age 17 to now 72, that's been my mission, to explore the mysteries of the universe and to understand the nature of reality. And like yourself, and we're kindred spirits.
Yeah.
And I've devoured everything I can and explored and meditated and done all the things we both are doing to try to appreciate the magnificence of the universe. The magnificence of the universe is far greater than any fantasies we'll ever impose on it. When we actually get grounded and discover what it is, it's awe-inspiring.
Absolutely. If you knew you were going to leave your body tomorrow and you wanted to leave a message for everybody listening or the world, what would be your parting message?
Magnificence of who you actually are is far greater than any fantasies you'll ever impose on yourself. Don't compare yourself to anyone. Don't put people on pedestals or pits. Just put them in your heart.
Yeah.
They're a reflection of you. Whatever you perceive in them is you. And if you prioritize your life and stick to what's truly most inspiring and meaningful that you feel called to do in life, you activate the part of the brain that helps you see both sides simultaneously. So you're not touched by the illusions of separation. You're unified with the universe and you're called into inspired, spontaneous action.
Beautiful. What you've just described in your own way is Indra's net or Indra's web. Yes. You familiar with Indra's web? The infinite jewels that are reflecting each other, but they're all God. Pretty cool. As we close, is there anything you'd like to share with regard to websites, contact information, or anything you would like to leave the listeners with? And we'll have it in show notes as well if you want.
My website is drdemartini.com, DRDEMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com. They can go on that, and they're probably going to have to believe in a reincarnated state because it's going to take them more than one lifetime to get through it.
Well, they'll just have to let their soul guide them then.
Yeah, but on there, they can just explore and just start seeing where it takes them. It's an educational website more than anything, and it's filled with YouTubes and interviews and education, and I'm an education guy. That's my love.
Yeah, me too. I think education's more important than gurus and all that other stuff, because if you're really educated, then you can do something with it. But if you just fall in love with a daddy figure and hope they'll rescue you from everything, then you're really just stuck in the child archetype.
Well, you're on the path of betrayal.
Yeah.
Because
self-betrayal.
Because you've created a fantasy that they have something you don't.
Yeah.
The first thing I do with my students is whatever you perceive in me, let's find it in you.
Amen. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for a great journey. I'm really, I feel very, very excited. It's fun to talk to somebody like you that has a worldview so close to mine, and yet you have such a unique angle on things that it really just enhances, my own conceptions and perceptions beautifully. It's kind of like another facet on the diamond, and it's great to be able to. I love talking to wise people because they kind of open all sorts of avenues of perception and reality. You think, wow, it's getting more magical by the moment. So thank you for a lot of magic today. It was really magical.
Well, I can say exactly the same thing because I sometimes get invited on podcasts that are less than deeply meaningful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
And
well,
so
I understand.
appreciate you asking quality questions. It is very obvious you've been a deeper explorer of the mysteries of life. It shows in your articulations and your depth. So it is just as much for me to be on your show, hopefully, as I've been able to be on the show. So it's kindred. So I'm very grateful.
I appreciate that a lot. And thank you. Thank you to all of you guys for going on the journey with Dr. Demartini and I. I hope you're is filling full of like excitement and opportunity and possibility. I bet you the windows are really clean right now for everybody. You can see clearly and embrace it. And thank you to all my sponsors for your amazing products, and thank you to all of you for buying from the sponsors, because they all use organic source materials and free range animals, and you're supporting companies that are supporting the planet and supporting the farmers, and a little bit goes to the podcast. So that's a great big circle of love. So thank you very, very much. And I look forward to another great podcast next week. And John, if you'd like to come back sometime, let's continue, because we only got to a few of the list of questions and comments there, dialogue
Fantastic.
points.
I would do it any day. Anytime you'd love to, just let me know.
Yeah, okay. I'll reach out to you. I'll give this a chance to get out there for a while, and then I'll tickle you and see what you want to get into instead of me
just
deciding.
Tell people that they can now join Survivors of Demartini, a 12-step program, Survivors of Demartini.
Well, you know what? I bet you those survivors become thrivers.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, lots of love to you. Enjoy your sailboat. And I'm excited for our next rendezvous. I met a soulmate today.
Nothing's missing.
You're so beautiful. Here.
Enjoy. Thank you for this wonderful time. It's great. It's been a great time.
We'll get out a piece of paper and we'll start writing qualities down.
Realize we found each other finally.
Yeah, finally. I love it. All right. Lots of love, John. Thank you very, very much. I'll have to call Penny in here because I don't know how to stop Zoom. I don't use it very often, but if you know how to stop it, you're good to go.
My dad said, you know how to do the calculus on figuring out the volume of doorknob, but you don't know how to turn the doorknob.
Exactly. Too funny. Smart dad. All right. Yep. Lots of love. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. Love. Bye.
Love you too, bud.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Dr. John Demartini. Dr. Demartini has a number of free gifts for Paul's listeners, including his workbook, 7 Steps to Expand the Next Level of Empowerment, available at demartini.fm/download. You can also watch his inspiring presentation, Awakening Your Astronomical Vision, that will leave you with profound insights and a deep sense of life purpose and inspiration, available at demartini.ink/yourvision. You can also take the Demartini Value Determination Process, an online 13-step process designed to help you determine your highest values or priorities in life. Visit demartini.ink/values process. Finally, Dr. Demartini invites you to 2 free masterclasses, Increase Your Deserve Level and Finally Get What You Want, at demartini.fm/JD1, and Discover the Hidden Order and its power to transform your life at demartini.fm /JD7. You can listen to Dr. Demartini's podcast, The Demartini Show, on Apple Podcasts, as well as find him in Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Dr. John Demartini, and on YouTube at Dr. Demartini. His website is drdemartini.com. That's DRDEMARTINI.com. For more interaction with Paul and to get priority notification about an exciting new extension of his Spirit Gym program and community, go to myspiritgym.com and sign up for the waitlist. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.